Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. We are live today, Bridgestone Arena, Preds and Florida Panthers. Ian, it has been a hot second since we have been at Bridgestone Arena. I mean, I was just thinking that today. I'm like, when's the last time we were here at Bridgestone Arena? We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee, and Ian is here with us today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
It is that time of the year. Combine time. Ian, did you listen to the Mike Borgonzi press conference today as he met with the media? And Brian Callahan met with the media as well today. Did you listen to the Mike Borgonzi press conference?
Not live, but yes, I did listen.
Okay. Did you get as excited about the Mike Borgonzi press conference as I think I did?
Probably not.
Okay. So I tweeted this out. I said, hey, I listened to the Borgonzi press conference and I freaking loved it. And you're going to say, wait a minute. He didn't really say anything in the Mike Borgonzi press conference today at the Combine. I'm sure when you guys think of what's important in these press conferences, you're probably thinking about, what did he say about trading the first overall pick? What did he say about the players they may draft? What did he say about the quarterbacks? And the answer to all of that is nothing. He really didn't say anything about that. The evaluations of players, the potential of trades. He was asked about Abdul Carter specifically, and he literally said, hey, I'm not sure I want to get into the individual evaluations. But that's okay, because his press conference still got me very, very excited. And I'm going to tell you why. What Mike Borgonzi did do is he talked about basic, simple, operational organization values that align with what I believe in. The truth of the matter is, for the last handful of years, the last couple of years at least, but I'd say even longer than that, and that includes John Robinson, there's been a lot of decisions that have been made by the Tennessee Titans that don't align with the values with which I feel like I was raised on when it comes to football. And Ian, I'm going to lump you in this too, because I feel like you had the exact same education I had. I feel like you probably share a lot of the same values that we're about to talk about.
Probably.
Because we learned them from Floyd Reese. Again, we talk about the old man all the time. We say, oh, the old man used to say this. The old man used to say that. That's what I learned football. That's who I learned it from. And he is the greatest general manager in the history of the Tennessee Titans. So maybe they should listen to some of that. But the previous administration did a lot of things differently. And every time I'd say, I don't think that's how you run an organization, I was told, no, Jared, you don't understand. That's the old school way. This is the new school way. Uh-huh. Or when they take injured players in the draft, like Caleb Farley, it's, I don't know. Not where I come from. Oh, no, Jared, you don't understand. Uh-huh. So what Mike Borgonzi did do today was he kind of gave us a peek behind the curtain as to what the first month of the job has been like since he's become the general managers. And there were some Floyd Reese maxims in there, if you will. Maxims, if you will. For starters, number one, he talked about wanting to fill holes in free agency before the draft and using the free agent board and the draft to dictate this, because the Titans didn't do that under the previous administration. So here's what Mike Borgonzi said when asked about using free agency to fill holes.
We're trying to fill, probably as many holes as we can before the draft. And you're trying to see, at this point, you have a free agency board, you have a draft board. You're trying to see the depth in free agency and the depth in the draft and where you might be able to acquire those players. But you certainly want to try to fill as many holes as you can in free agency. And, we have some work to do on the roster.
Ian, where have we heard about the free agency board before?
Got to match them. Got to marry the two.
I mean, that was, again, a core principle. And over the last couple of years, the Titans didn't do that. The Titans, and not just this administration, or not just the previous administration, but the one before that too. The previous administration went into the 2023 draft with only Treylon Burks at wide receiver. They went into the 2024 draft with no right tackle and no left tackle. They went into the 2022 draft with no right tackle, letting David Quessenberry walk as a free agent. Again, that would have never flown under Floyd Reese. The idea of well, let's just go into the draft with about 8 holes to fill. That would have never flown. That was not okay. Last year, the Titans went into the draft with no replacement for Danico Autry. So with the 38th pick, they had to take a DT. That totally goes against the values with which I'm raised on. And here's Mike Borgonzi saying we got to fill as many holes as we can before we get to the draft. The reason being, he wants to be able to draft the best players with the first pick, the 35th pick. If he moves back, moves up, add some more picks, he wants the ability to do what he wants to do as opposed to, well, now we got to take a DT and we can't trade back, even though the Rams are probably going to offer 2 second-round picks. You know, they can't do that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Mike Borgonzi was talking about how they've used the coaches. As far as this administration is concerned, here's what Mike Borgonzi said in their personnel meetings of how they've used the coaches.
Yeah, so that was part of the process over the last few weeks is really because we're trying to get everything done at once here, free agency draft. And we met with the coaches during lunch during these times just to get a feel of, you know, the players on the roster, you know, specifically, you know, how they are in meeting rooms and everything else. So that's a big part of it. We met with Brian and his staff over the past month here.
Oh, last year we were told we sat down with the coaches and they taught us the teaching tape. They showed us the players they wanted us to go get them. We think it is very, very important to include the coaches in on the discussions. We want to know what players our coaches want us to go get. We want to sit down with the coaches. We want coaches. Again, can we play that cut again, Ian? Mike Borgonzi, when it comes to the involvement of the coaches?
Yeah, so that was part of the process over the last few weeks is really because we're trying to get everything done at once here, free agency draft. And we met with the coaches during lunch during these times just to get a feel of.
During lunch. So we had meetings and the personnel staff met during the day for some serious, hunkering down, scouting discussions, personnel stuff. And then we called the coaches in during lunch so we could ask them, hey, tell us, does Nicholas T. Ferrer, a.k.a.
PT.
Does he work hard at all in the meeting rooms? Is he as much of a softy as he looks on the tape? That's all they did. That's it. Just during lunch while I chomped down on my turkey sandwich. And again, the way I was raised was personnel guys do personnel, coaches coach players. Some guys like Bill Belichick, good enough to do both. Jeff Fisher, not so much. Scout, coaches coach. And in the previous administration, it was, we're all in this together. We're going to have the coaches sit down and break down the teaching tape for us, and they're going to show us. Not this administration. This administration's like, can you call the linebacker coach in? And can you also get us a side of honey mustard? Thank you. Number 3, when they show up to work, here's what Mike Borgonzi said.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important time for us. You get in, early in the morning before the sun's up, and you're out of the building when the sun's down. So that's what he's referring to, and it's going into darkness is what we call it. But it's an important time for just to build camaraderie with the staff, creating bonds with the staff as well. And so we did that for the past months, which I think was great.
Okay. Again, we show up when it's dark outside. We leave when it's dark outside. That's what we were raised on. The general manager does. About a year ago, I went the day after Brian Callahan got hired. I sat down with Brian Callahan, and I sat down with him at 7 in the morning. I said, look, I'll come first thing in the morning. We'll do it, sit down. That way I can meet the coach, and he can know that I'm really not that big of an a-hole. But that's okay. So we'll sit down with the coach, and we sat down at 7 o'clock. I got there at about 6:30 or something. I get in there, sit down with Callahan at 7, and at 7:15, 7:20, Rand Carthon was checking in for the day. And as I saw him walking in, and this was a clock-in walk. This wasn't he had gone out and come back in. This was a clocking in for the day at 7:20 in the morning. I thought to myself, if I told Floyd Reese that the Titans general manager just showed up for work at 7:20 in the morning, he would vomit all over the place. Now, I didn't bring that up when we talked about Rand's work ethic or anything like that because the Titans invited me in to sit down with Callahan, and I didn't want to sit there and all of a sudden throw it against him. But I knew, like, 7:20 in the morning? Like, I'm working before 7:20 in the morning, and I host a talk show. And again, I know Floyd was old school, so showing up at 4 o'clock in the morning is probably not what they all do nowadays. But again, Borgonzi's like, yeah, we show up when it's dark, we leave when it's dark. Love it. And fourth, and most importantly, the one thing that John Robinson and Rand Carthon had in common, the one thing that will change the board at this point in time, here's what Mike Borgonzi said.
You know, we try not to make drastic changes, Paul, on it, but some of the medical information obviously will affect that. You know, some of the testing does move guys up and down the board a little bit. But, you know, we try not to make drastic measures. We want to be a tape-driven team and really not just depend on these other variables that come in.
So what's going to matter to us as far as we adjust? Injuries. So when somebody is injured, guess what? They get moved down. With the Titans in the previous administrations, guys with injuries seem to get moved up. Caleb Farley's hurt, take him. Corey Davis is hurt, take him. L'Jarius Sneed's hurt, trade for him. Not here. At least the sense I get from their values, not here. And I understand there's more than one way to skin a cat. And the way that Floyd Reese did things is probably not the way that everybody else does things. And I'm sure there are general managers who have built good teams and have won Super Bowls doing it their way and not the way that I was raised on, the way Ian was raised on, the way Ryan Porth was raised on when we were sitting in that office with Floyd every day for an hour before we'd go on the air for 4 hours. But the way that I know how to do it, I know works. And with the previous administration, there was way too much of, no, we're not going to do it this way. And you don't understand. You will see. So they bring this guy in here, and immediately he's shown 4 separate things, with just little minor details, just little minor stories in which I see operationally the values with which he works. And this starts from the top on down. So I don't know if Chad Brinker shows up that early or not, or if he was coming in at 8 in the morning too. I don't know. But I know this. There are certain things when it comes to being a general manager that are a part of the job, that for some reason, a lot of these guys who get these jobs, when they're assistant GMs, when they're director of player personnel, when they're whatever the title is, they seem to not understand is part of the job. It's what the word general means when it comes to general manager. And for 2 years, the Titans had somebody who didn't do any of those things. The Titans had somebody who, hate to say it, was sleeping on the plane, showing up to work at 7 o'clock instead of 4 o'clock. Those things get to everybody. It goes from the top on down. And so while, again, when Mike Borgonzi stands up to a microphone, you all probably want to know, are they going to trade the first pick? Or are they going to use the first pick? What's he think of Carter? What's he think of Hunter? What's he think of Ward? What's he think of Sanders? And he's not going to answer those questions at this point in time. He's probably never going to answer those questions. He's just going to do those things. Not that I expected him to answer those questions. But when it comes to the core values about how you run your football team, my values, and again, you know where they come from. They seem to align. And that, for an organization with a coach who, I mean, I don't even know if they want him. I don't even know if he's got any juice. Certainly a coaching staff I don't have a lot of faith in. An owner who, again, might be one of the worst in the league. At least this gives me some hope. The Mike Borgonzi way. Again, showing up to work when it's dark outside. Not investing in injured players. Letting the coaches coach, but not having them involved in personnel. And again, filling all the holes before the draft so you don't get there on draft night and say, we have to take a tackle. Oh, I love it. 615-737-1025. That's how we're starting. 615-737-1025. Mike Borgonzi was asked about the first pick, and predictably, he said what we thought he was going to say, and the reaction was what we thought it was going to be. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game.
How much action are you? I know it's early, but is that number one pick a big topic of conversation?
Well, Well, it has been, yeah. I mean, it has been in the media for sure. Anytime you have number one pick, it's always going to be a topic of conversation. Yeah.
Has it gotten to a point where a lot of other teams are getting very nosy?
I would say we've had some phone calls. Yeah. I'll keep those phone calls to the vest, but we've had some phone calls. Yeah.
Mike Borgonzi said absolutely nothing in regards to the number one pick. We've gotten some phone calls on the number one pick. There's also no way to find out whether or not that's true. But predictably, and we said yesterday on the program, he's going to go to the combine and say, yeah, I'm open to doing whatever with the pick. And yet at the same time, what I say was going to happen. I was going to say they're going to make a big deal. Whatever he says, even if it's nothing, they're going to make a big deal about it. And on cue, Adam Schefter hitting the Twitter machine, quote, Titans general manager Mike Borgonzi told reporters that he has received call about the availability of the number one overall pick. The Titans will listen, but it is too early in the process for any decisions. Breaking news! Ian, can we run that cut again? This was Mike Borgonzi again being asked about the number one overall pick.
How much action are you? I know it's early, but is that number one pick a big topic of conversation with the
Well, it has been, yeah. I mean, it has been in the media for sure. Anytime you have number one pick, it's always going to be a topic of conversation. Yeah.
Has it gotten to a point where a lot of other teams are getting very nosy?
I would say we've had some phone calls. Yeah. I'll keep those phone calls to the vest, but we've had some phone calls. Yeah.
We've had some phone calls. Breaking news! I mean, it's just ridiculous. And he also was asked about the generational talent comments that Chad Brinker made, which, again, Chad Brinker said it in the deposition he did with the local media. I was there. He said it, and it did not even register with me when he was like, obviously we want more picks, but obviously we're not going to trade a generational player. And then Adam Schefter, who wasn't there, on the Twitter machine was like, Chad Brinker says they will not trade for a generational player. And then he's going on Boston radio talking about that gives a lot of people sense that it will be the pass rusher out of Penn State or the corner/receiver out of Colorado. And I'm like, that wasn't really how that went down. Borgonzi was asked about generational players. Here's what he said.
Listen, there's a handful of players, anytime you're at the top of the draft that you would deem generational talents. And we certainly feel that way this year as well.
Okay. So asked about it. Yeah, sure. There's always guys and we feel that way. Again, said nothing. And if you thought he was going to say something, then you do not understand how this works. When it comes to the number one pick, the only time the general manager will say something and really, truly say it is when he is trying to get a message to somebody else. That's why yesterday, for instance, when the Giants reporter at ESPN.com reported that the Giants have their sights set on Shedeur Sanders, I said it really means they're interested in Cam Ward. Because that's how you use the media this time of the year. And so with Borgonzi, when it comes to on-the-record conference, he's not going to say anything. So if you took something away from those comments, if I hear somebody say something like, Mike Borgonzi says there are generational players in this draft, and you take them seriously, I will not be able to follow you. He didn't say anything today of the value that you guys care about. He did not say anything. Now, the things that I care about, the way he runs the organization, the way he does business, I absolutely loved every second of it. But the stuff you guys care about, like are they gonna spend a bunch of money in free agency? He didn't say any of that, and there was no indications of which way this team is going to go or not go. I also heard an interview today that was done with the Vikings brass, in which they were asked about Sam Darnold, and they gave this like really long-winded roundabout answer about, well, we could tag him, we could sign him, we could trade him, we could do whatever. And afterwards, they were like, yep, sounds like they're not really going to tag Sam Darnold. I'm like, you got that from that? Because I didn't hear that. But again, he's not going to answer the questions you want answers to until he makes the move. So we'll go to your phones, which are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. And I should note that our combine coverage all week is brought to you by the New Cumberland, Nashville's resort-style community overlooking downtown on the Cumberland River. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Plus, Brian Callahan today met with the media. Not exactly sure how much juice he's got, but there were two things he did say that I think were messages kind of to the organization more so than the fans. We'll get into that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game.
Anytime you're picking, especially in the first 3 rounds, you're looking for guys that can impact and play. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not other paths to that process. There's a lot of different ways it's been done over the years with guys that have spent time sitting. Some guys have played right away. Those are all things that we'll evaluate as we keep going. But certainly picking a guy at the top of the draft that is going to be an impact player.
That was Brian Callahan today. He did meet with the media. Now, I would say this. When Mike Borgonzi says we brought the coaches in during our lunch break to kind of tell us about how guys were in the meeting rooms, it tells me that Brian Callahan doesn't have a lot of juice when it comes to what they're going to do with the roster. Now, it is funny because when Borgonzi was hired, both before he was hired and after he was hired, I felt, trying to say this the right way, without Joe Rexroad trying to give me a grammar lesson at the same time, and trying to make sure that I say my words carefully here. I was under the impression, just based off of sense, I was under the impression that Brian Callahan's role in terms of personnel was going to be reduced. That before with Rand Carthon, it was, we want everybody in this together. We want the coaches to tell us what players we want to go get, and then we want to go get those players for the coaches. And that the coaches were empowered. They were showing them teaching tape, and they were relying, J.C. Latham got picked, and Diana Rossini couldn't tweet fast enough that this was Bill Callahan's favorite player in the draft. Mike Borgonzi shows up, goes, yeah, we called him in our lunch break, ask how these guys on the team are in the meetings. So I don't know how much juice Callahan has. I don't think he has very much. And I said that just based off of the sense that I came to understand. And the next morning I wake up and Kaharski is on TV. Yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm telling you, Callahan does not have a lot of juice right now, and he knows it. And I give Brian Callahan credit because I'm not sure he's a very good coach, but I do think he can read the room. And in his press conference today, there were really 2 things that stood out, in which, again, other things like, how important the area. Oh, man, the area scouts are really important. Great. Thanks, coach. But there were 2 things reading between the line that I heard that I'm like, Brian Callahan wants everybody to know this. He won't say it, but he's saying it. The first was about Will Levis. Now, again, the question wasn't about Will Levis, and his answer wasn't about Will Levis, but what he's telling you is about Will Levis. And all these sunshine pumping he did this time last year when it came to Will Levis about, man, he's everything you want in a quarterback. He's a big part of the reason why I took the job. He translates it great from the meeting room to the practice field. It's just, and then to see him crap his pants for the entire season, Brian Callahan was asked about how important it is of what these guys in this quarterback evaluation process are able to show the coaches that they can do in the meeting room. And Brian Callahan goes out of his way to tell you, even if they can do it on the meeting room sometimes, it doesn't mean they can do it in the game.
It's safe for you to evaluate how a guy takes it from the chalkboard. It's actually time comes without actually being on the field.
That part's the hardest part, to be honest. That's a good question because there's a lot of guys that can talk it in the meeting room. They know what to say, how to say it. They can articulate their schematics. But the hardest part is can they take what's being taught and then execute it? And sometimes it's really more about taking it from the practice, from the meeting room to the game day. That's the part that really matters the most. Because guys can sometimes do the meeting room to the practice field, but it's about how do you execute under pressure and under duress when it's all live. And that's the hardest part to find out. Sometimes you don't necessarily know until you know.
I mean, he's talking about Levis. Like at that point, it's like, how important is what they can do in the chalkboard and bring it in and all that? He's like, yeah, that's important. But sometimes with some quarterbacks, in my experience, they can talk it, they can write it on the board, they can practice it. Then when they get in the game, it's like, oh my God, this guy can't do anything right. He's talking about Levis. And he's talking about all the toxic positivity that he pumped in there last year when it came to this young quarterback who I don't think was ready for the responsibility that they gave him. And thus, wilted when it really mattered. And Brian Callahan is trying to distance himself from his words last year when it came to Levis, saying, hey, sometimes you never know until they get out there in the game. Trust me, I know, because that guy last year, that's how that was. So if you have any thought that they may keep Will Levis on to be the starting quarterback of the Titans, that right there is your answer. No. The second thing was this, and I think this is a Brian Callahan reading the room, which is, again, I'm the one that said that when Brinker got put in charge, Brinker didn't want to keep Callahan, and Amy made him. And Borgonzi clearly didn't hire Brian Callahan. Who knows what their relationship is or isn't? I don't know. But I think Brian Callahan knows his place. Because last year it was, we want the coaches dictating to us what kind of players we're going to pick. And this year it's Brian Callahan saying, I'll change the scheme for whatever player you want to draft me, play the cut.
Our job as coaches is to put players in the best position to have success. And I would never sacrifice talent for system. It's always going to be player driven and player first. So if you can find a great player, we fit them. And however that looks, there's plenty of plays in football in all three phases that you can find ways for guys to have success. So I would always say the player is going to come first, and it's our job as coaches to fit what we do around that player, whether that's an offensive lineman, a receiver, a quarterback, a pass rusher, whatever that looks like. Our job is to fit the system to the talent, and I would never sacrifice scheme over talent at the end of the day as a general philosophy.
Basically, I'll change my play calling. I'll change my systems. I'll change the defense. I'll change whatever you want for whoever you want, Mike Borgonzi. Chad, whoever you want, I'll change it. Because I know, like, I am on borrowed time right now, and I have got to win, and I've got to win with you being happy about it. So go get me your players, and I'll coach them. Those were the two messages today that I took away from the Callahan press conference. Number one, hey, man, everything I said about Levis seemed right, so don't blame me for pumping his tires way too much because he couldn't take it to the game. So last year, this time, when we weren't interested in J.J. McCarthy and we weren't interested in Michael Penix and we weren't interested in Bo Nix because we thought we had a quarterback, and I was doing every podcast under the sun to talk about how smart Levis was and how ready Levis was and how much I believed in Levis. Don't look at me as if I'm some moron that doesn't know anything about quarterbacks, because he could do it all right, but he just couldn't take it to the game. That was the first message. The second message, don't worry about my scheme, guys. I'll change whatever you need me to change in order for me to keep my job with the players that you want. And I will say this, I'm not knocking Brian Callahan for either of those two comments. In fact, I find that to be very self-aware from the head coach. It also gives me the sense that, again, he doesn't have a lot of juice anymore inside the building and is probably looking at this of, hey, Chad, Mike, just give me a shot. Give me a shot. Let me see what I can do. You guys go give me the players, and we'll just coach our asses off. Which, again, is a core value with which I believe. The GM picks the players, and the coach's job is to coach them. Now, I don't like this Amy Adams Strunk special of the GM picks the players and the head coach is not somebody the GM picked, which she seems to love. But again, her core values don't align with mine. Luckily, Mike Borgonzi's core values on how to run the football team somewhat align with what I believe in. And that gives me hope that the Titans may be able to pull themselves out of this at some point. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number here on the program. If you want to weigh in, 615-737-1025. One texter said, Rand Carthon used to always talk about how much he worked, which is usually a sign that a person doesn't work. Glad I haven't heard the same with Mike Borgonzi. Again, and I saw some of this in the YouTube chat where people are like, oh, Jared's just going at Rand Carthon today. And it's not that. Look, Rand Carthon's gone. So this idea of, well, you know, I don't believe in Rand Carthon. You might believe in Rand Carthon, or you might have believed in Rand Carthon. I mean, look, he's not going to get another general manager job, so I'm not going to be wrong about this. Sorry to the YouTube chat. But let me say this. When it came to my criticisms of Rand, oftentimes I felt misheard. Because as soon as I'd say something, it turned into, oh, we know why you don't like Rand, hinting at the idea that I might be racist. and might not like the fact that the Titans had an African-American general manager. I don't give a rat's ass what color the general manager of the Titans is. I don't care if it's a woman, a man. I just want to win. But the process with which I saw Rand Carthon do the job of general manager is not what I was raised on. And there are several different instances of that where I would see Rand Carthon do something that completely went against what I believed in. Again, showing up at 7:20 in the morning was something that I could not fathom telling the old man that the general manager of the Titans was showing up at 7:20 in the morning. I couldn't fathom it. So people now are going to say, oh, well, you're sitting here and you're knocking Rand Carthon because you want to. No, I'm knocking Rand Carthon because I thought the way he ran the organization was an absolute joke. And that's why the team sucked so bad. I mean, I heard at the Combine or the Super Bowl, people were telling me, they were like, yeah, the biggest problem is nobody wanted to say it because it perpetuates a stereotype. But Rand Carthon was pretty lazy. Which again goes back to the piece Paul wrote, which again goes back to me talking about Rand showing up at 7:20 in the morning. I mean, Rand Carthon did an interview last year for Sirius XM during practice. Like during training camp, Sirius XM had the microphones, had the setup. They were waiting for practice to be over to do their interviews where they talk to the quarterback and they talk to Jeffrey Simmons and they'll probably talk to Calvin Ridley and they talk to the coach and they talk to the GM. They do that with every team. It's called the training camp tour. And Rand Carthon did his interview during practice. Luke Gifford picked off a pass and ran it back for a touchdown. And in the middle of the interview, Rand Carthon was like, oh, yep, somebody must have done something. Like, dude, you're the general manager. You need to be watching practice. I can guarantee it that Mike Borgonzi, if any of the things align with what he's already said he's been doing, if any of this aligns with his values, I guarantee you Mike Borgonzi will not be doing interviews during practice. After I heard that, when Carthon did that interview, I asked Sean Reese, Floyd's son, I said, would your dad have ever done an interview during practice? And Sean texted back and said, nobody with a brainstem would have asked him to do an interview during practice. Again, that's just the difference in what the previous administration valued and what I believe in. And with Rand Carthon, yeah, it was always talk about how much work we've accomplished and what we've done and how great everything is and how awesome we are and all those kind of things. And again, like, everything's great, but you're doing interviews during practice? Sleeping on the plane? Not calling influential media members back when they've got some news they want to discuss before they go public with it? That's what the GM does. 615-737-1025. More your phone, Stillman & Company, 615-737-1025, Stillman & Company. And let me tell all the fine folks out there to tune in today to 94.9 The Fan for Vandy Baseball as the Commodores host Tennessee Tech. Pregame begins at 4:15. First pitch is at 4:30, and coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com.
realistic is it to think that Travis Hunter might be able to play on both sides of the ball?
Oh, very realistic. Yeah.
Good deal, I guess.
Yeah, it's very realistic. I think he's a unique player that there's not a whole lot of other players you could compare what he's done. There's not many guys that have played that many snaps on both sides of the ball. And you watch his tape and you see his ability to play both at a very high level. So, yeah, I think anybody that you talk to about him is going to say the same thing, that he's got the ability to play both. And that I think you're going to find out where he fits if you were to get him. But he's got a really unique ability to do a lot of different things.
So where do you first start?
I would say you probably start him. He probably starts at corner, and then you find ways to interject him into the offense as he gets more comfortable. He plays more and more offensively. But I think his corner is probably his starting point, in my opinion. You might get varying opinions on that, but then I think he's got a real role as a receiver.
That was Brian Callahan today talking about Travis Hunter. And when I heard him say, I think you start him at corner, I thought, no, thank you. No, thank you. Travis Hunter's value to me goes down when you say Travis Hunter is going to start at corner. And I cannot take a corner with the first overall pick in the draft, just like I can't take a guard or a punter with the 11th overall pick. I can take a receiver with the first pick if there's no quarterback. I can take a pass rusher with the first pick. I can take a tackle with the first pick. I can't take a corner. So if I were the Titans and you were trying to make the case to me that I had to take Travis Hunter with the first pick, the value of Travis Hunter is you're going to get a starting receiver who will be starting at wide receiver, and you're going to get a starting corner. Well, Jared, I don't know if there's enough time for him to be able to do both. Didn't seem to have a problem with it at Colorado. Seemed to learn the playbook there, right? Still was able to play corner. He can't do that in the NFL. Well, if he can't do that in the NFL, then his value takes a hit. If you're trying to convince me to take Travis Hunter with the first overall pick, he has to play both ways. That's the value. Again, receiver, elite position. It's not quarterback, but it's in that second tier of positions. Corner is not. Any Scarbini can play corner. If you have a pass rush, you get to the quarterback, he can't see it. It doesn't matter if you have Champ Bailey, Deion Sanders, or Greg Maben. It doesn't matter. Again, I'd rather have like a good corner than Tremaine Brock Sr., but it's not the end of the world for me one way or another. That's why like a guy like Jarvis Brownlee, fine, I'm good with him. Stick him out there. If I can rush the quarterback, Jarvis Brownlee makes the Pro Bowl. If I can't, Jarvis Brownlee will get exposed because he's a solid player. But again, Champ Bailey can't cover forever. So if, again, this seems to be the sentiment is Travis Hunter is going to be a corner. And I do wonder, again, I don't know how much juice Brian Callahan has in these meetings where, again, Mike Borgonzi said they'd bring the coaches in during lunch. I do wonder, is that the assistant coaches and Callahan's in with some of the more big boy meetings, or is it really all the coaches and they're just siloed like personnel over here, coaches over here? Like they don't even sit at the same table in the cafeteria. I don't know. But I do wonder if I'm Mike Borgonzi, if I'm a little pissed that Brian Callahan let that out of like the I see him as a corner probably means they see him as a corner. And again, I can't take a corner with the number one pick in the draft. So if you say, hey, he's going to start off as a corner and then over time, over the years, we'll start working him in at receiver, that's not going to work for me. Like I want Travis Hunter, and I want Travis Hunter to play wide receiver and corner the first day he shows up to training camp. Like I want him doing 7-on-7 drills. And so for the first 7-on-7, he'll be at receiver. Then if they do 7-on-7 later in the day, he's at corner. On the first day of practice. That's what I want. One texter says, Will on Music Row says, I believe John Robinson when he spoke. I didn't believe Rand when he spoke. I believe Borgonzi when he speaks. None of this has anything to do with the words they use and everything to do with how they deliver their message. Not that it needs to be said, but I don't believe any of what Amy and her company have to say. So there was one instance today where Borgonzi was asked about wanting to field a competitive team And he made the comment that they want to be competitive every year, but they have to manage expectations. And it felt to me like Mike Borgonzi said it without saying it, where he basically said, like, guys, there's a chance we might suck this year, which is absolutely something that Rand Carthon would never have hinted at. In the toxic positivity realm, that was unacceptable. The idea that they might suck. Just terribly unacceptable. There was also one thing, and I forget exactly what it is that Callahan said, that really got up my bum about guys not being able to show things in practice. And it took me back to that one moment in training camp where they were scrimmaging the Seahawks, and it was the 2-minute drill, and Levis got out there, and on the first play threw an interception. And instead of Brian Callahan blowing the whistle and saying, hey, line it up again, let's go, he just said, okay, good job, offense. You're done for the day. And I thought to myself, he threw one pass and it was an interception? And that's it? Like that was it? He threw one pass? And I asked Callahan, I'm like, you don't have any more live bullets in training camp, so how are you going to work these things? Oh, we'll have plenty of time to get it figured out. You'll see. Oh, okay. One texter says, if they draft a quarterback and just throw him out there, we will be saying the same thing next year at this time. Maybe. The one thing I want to caution everybody on is free agency is before the draft. And Mike Borgonzi said today they're going to try to fill as many holes as possible in free agency so they can get to the draft and draft the best player. So when you say they don't have an offensive line, that is true. But that doesn't mean that they can't go get offensive line men in free agency. It's not like if they draft Abdul Carter, the only player that they will add this offseason will be Abdul Carter. If they draft Cam Ward, the only player that they add won't necessarily just be Cam Ward. And sometimes I think people look at it like that. Like, well, if we get a quarterback, we're not going to have any receivers other than Ridley. Our tight end Chig is probably a backup. We got no right tackle. We got no right guard. Like, right. Like they're supposed to use the other picks in the free agency to go get a tight end and go get a right guard. And you have to hope that this guy knows how to do it. I like the process with which he works because the values with which he has seem to align with the values that I believe in. But I don't know if you can evaluate it or not. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Mel Kiper Jr. has his latest mock draft out. And there is a caveat to how Mel is picking things. We'll get to that coming up next. Stillman and Company, you know what? Let's give something away because why not? Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll win a pair of tickets to see Gary Clark Jr. at the Ryman Auditorium on Thursday, March 6th. Good luck. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063. The game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee Bridgestone Arena tonight. Predators and the defending Cup champion Florida Panthers right here at Bridgestone Arena, 7 o'clock puck drop. Barry Trotz rejoins the program, 5 o'clock, and we got questions for when it comes to Barry Trotz today at 5 o'clock. But the combine is underway in Indianapolis, and our combine updates are brought to you by the New Cumberland, Nashville's resort-style community overlooking downtown Nashville on the Cumberland River. So, Mel Kiper Jr. has his latest mock draft out. But there's one caveat when it comes to Mel's mock draft. The important element in this is, according to Mel Kiper, he wrote at ESPN that his current mock draft is, quote, based on current thinking on how round one could look, based on what I am hearing from execs, scouts, and coaches in the league. So in his first mock draft, Mel had the Titans taking Cam Ward with the first overall pick. In his second mock draft, based off of what he's hearing from executive scouts and coaches in the league, Mel Kiper has the Titans taking Abdul Carter out of Penn State with the first pick. And my initial reaction was probably the same as a lot of you all, which was, yes, Abdul Carter, and not one of these quarterbacks, number one. But what that tells me is that Mel, and we heard this from Daniel Jeremiah, who said the exact same thing last week at NFL Network when he put out his mock draft, is that people in the league think the Titans are not going quarterback at number one, and that Cleveland will go quarterback and will go Cam Ward at number two. According to the top of Mel Kiper's mock draft, Tennessee at 1 goes Abdul Carter. Cleveland at 2 goes Cam Ward. The New York Giants at 3 go Travis Hunter. The New England Patriots at 4 go Will Campbell. And by the way, I am laughing my tush off because Will Campbell, the big question, the tackle out of LSU, is how big are his arms? Like, are his arms long enough for him to be able to play tackle in the NFL, or is he going to have to kick it inside the guard? Does he have 33-inch arms, or does he have 32 and 7/8? Because if it's 32 and 7/8, well, we know Vrabel's not going to play him at tackle. But as of now, he's got Campbell going to New England and Mason Graham at 5 to Jacksonville. Shedeur Sanders goes 7th to the Jets in Mel Kiper's mock draft. Again, what this tells me, and this is a mirror of what Daniel Jeremiah put out there last week, is that people in the league do not think the Titans are going quarterback, and they think the Browns are. This is very important because everybody wants to ask Mike Borgonzi about the conversations he's had when it comes to the trades, about all the talks of who's called for the number one pick, and are you going to trade the pick or you're not going to trade the pick, and who are you going to trade the pick with, and who are you? And every time you talk to a general manager about these kind of things, they'll always say you have to have a dance partner. It's easy for Johnny Joe in Lebanon to just say, trade the pick. But there has to be a dance partner. And the reality is, the way this board is setting up and the way that people are starting to believe this is going to go down is they are starting to believe that, hey, Tennessee is not interested in quarterback at 1, but Cleveland is. Now, here's why the Titans haven't made any decisions yet, for everybody that wants an answer today as to how the draft's going to go. Because no matter how much people say the veteran player acquisition period, which is unrestricted free agency, the trade market, sometimes restricted free agency, the veteran player acquisition market will dictate the draft market, even though they're not really the same. Because let's use the Giants as an example. The Giants are letting it be known that they like Shedeur Sanders, which again leads me to believe that they really like Cam Ward. But if the Giants end up with Matthew Stafford, well, now they're no longer a trade partner for the Titans. If Matthew Stafford stays in LA and Sam Darnold stays in Minnesota, there are 6 job openings, including yours, 6 job openings for what? 1, maybe 2 quarterbacks? And everybody's starting to hear that Cleveland is going quarterback at number 2. I am convinced Cleveland is going quarterback at 2, and I'm going to tell you why. Because even though the cap is fake, and the Browns take advantage of that all the time, they are one of the biggest spenders in the league. They're not going to commit $80 million to the quarterback position. The cap is fake. The money is not. So when it comes to budgeting a football team out, Jimmy Haslam's probably fine with paying $320 million for his team. But he's probably not okay with paying $360 million for his football team. Well, if he goes out and gets Sam Darnold, or he goes out and tries to get in the Matthew Stafford market or the Aaron Rodgers market, that's what's going to happen. So the only way around that is to take a young quarterback. That's the way they draft the quarterback. Deshaun's technically on the roster. They let Deshaun's contract expire. Deshaun leaves, and now they've got their young quarterback. Cleveland's going quarterback at 2. I am almost convinced of it, that they are going quarterback at number 2. Which means now every other team that doesn't have a quarterback has to call you if they, A, for sure want a quarterback, and B, if they want their one quarterback and not the other guy. Because if Cleveland's going quarterback at 2, that means they might take your guy. It is possible that the Giants could be sitting there saying, okay, well, we like Ward, we don't like Sanders, or the Raiders, or the Jets, or somebody else. So when I see Mel Kiper put out a mock draft, and Mel Kiper says, hey, this mock draft isn't exactly what I'm thinking. This is what I'm hearing around the league. Again, here's my current thinking on how round 1 could look based on what I'm hearing around the league from executive scouts and coaches. And he says Abdul Carter 1, Cam Ward 2. I'm thinking, yes. Not because the Titans are going in on Abdul Carter, but because, again, it cements what I believe, which is Cleveland has to go quarterback at number 2. And if Cleveland has to go quarterback at number 2, every single one of these other teams, the Giants at 3, the Raiders at 6, the Jets at 7, if they want their choice, they have to call you. That's the most important part here. They have to call you. And again, if Mel's hearing it, it means other people are hearing it too. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025 here on our program. Speaking of Mel's mock draft, he did have another pick that I saw today, and I almost fell out of my chair laughing. I hope this happens. I hope this comes to fruition. We'll get to it next. And your phone, Stillman & Company, 102.5 The Game.
I'm big on Shador, but I think I understand why you would go away from it. Like I said, he doesn't have the wow factor. I understand that. And certainly, Cam Ward, you look at what he, in a draft that was a little stronger, be as highly rated as he is, or up there at the top. No, he would not. I get that. But to say that for Shador, for me, if I'm looking and I say I need a quarterback, I understand why people would have mixed views and mixed opinions within their front office on Shador. I've been a big Shador guy, but this is a mock draft. It's based on what you're hearing, and I think there's a chance that Shador can drop just a bit. And then we also have to factor in the trade possibility. With the Jets, say at the end of the day, we love Shador, but the Raiders could take him. The Jets could move ahead, maybe to Jacksonville at 5 or maybe to New England at 4 and get him. But I'm not projecting trades until mock 4.0 in April, but certainly that's not out of the realm of possibility that a trade up for Shador could possibly take place.
Mel Kiper Jr., and he likes Shador Sanders, but has Shador 7 to the Jets. So when I was looking at the mock draft today, immediately I looked at the Titans, saw Abdul Carter at 1, thought, oh, yes. And I saw Shador at 7 to the Jets, and I thought to myself, oh, my God. I hope this happens. Oh, my God. Ian, can we pray on the program?
I mean, I don't think there's any rule against that.
Lord, please have Mel Kiper's mock draft come to fruition and have the New York Jets select Shador Sanders with the 7th overall pick. Hell, I don't care. They can trade up. Please have Shador Sanders on the New York Jets. Amen. And I say this because that has complete and total train wreck written all over it, and I cannot wait. So, again, I understand it's not Mel's job when he's coming up with a mock draft to say, well, this would be a bad fit for a certain player, so I'm not going to mock him here. And bad teams take players that are bad fits all the time. But this Shador Sanders to the Jets, oh, my God, it's incredible. So the New York Jets, who blow it with every single young quarterback, to the point now where it's like, I don't think it's the young quarterback. Whether it's Mark Sanchez, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, or Zach Wilson. And by the way, Geno Smith and Sam Darnold have had some pretty impressive second acts. So the Jets blow it with every young quarterback, are going to draft Deion Sanders' kid to a team that had a Hall of Famer at quarterback last year, and that wasn't good enough. Their star wide receiver is Moody. They have a first-time head coach who is a defensive head coach and a GM who is a first-time GM whose job is to work for the coach. Not to mention terrible ownership that allows the teenage kids to use Madden football to make decisions. Boy, that's going to end well. And again, when it comes to Shador Sanders, there are people out there that don't even think he's good. Like, period. The guy from Pro Football Focus, their lead draft analyst, he might be a nobody. He might have his head up his ass. I don't know. But he has a late second round grade on Shador Sanders. So again, you're going to put Deion Sanders' kid in New York City with the expectations that come with a top 10 draft choice. You're going to stick him in New York City, and you are going to say, okay, Shador, here you go. Let's see how you do. And you think there's a chance that's going to work out? You know what New York's not going to accept? Because, again, I've never lived in New York, but I feel like I know New York well enough, and I think a lot of you know New York well enough. You know what's not going to work in New York? When Shador Sanders is the quarterback of a team that loses to every good team they play. At Colorado, where nobody actually cares whether or not Colorado wins or loses, it's great. Shador Sanders had a baked-in excuse every time they lost. Blame my offensive line. They lost to Nebraska. Shador said that after the game. He sat there and asked about how many times Dylan Raiola got hit compared to how many times he got hit. Boy, that'll go well in New York. Do that, Shador. See what happens. And the one thing that I am convinced of, no matter what anybody else tells me, because I believe in his core Deion Sanders is a classic example of a narcissist. Deion is not going to sit back and accept Shedeur Sanders playing terribly with the Jets and a national narrative being formed that it's his fault. Deion will not accept that. So every press conference he has in Boulder, he'll be asked about Shedeur's game, and Deion will comment on it, and he will opine, and it probably won't be very flattering for everybody else except for Deion's son. And immediately, as soon as Deion says it, it will be on every single show on ESPN and Fox and everything else. Like, that is exactly what's going to happen. I could not think of a worse fit than Shedeur Sanders to the Jets. And you would say, well, the Giants are in New York too, and that's a bad organization. And you're right. The Giants are in New York, and they are a bad organization, and they have a dopey general manager in Joe Shane. And so I don't think Shedeur works out there either. But the Giants do not have the reputation for being as volatilely dangerous as the Jets are. There's just something about the Jets. And again, I don't think it's an accident that Geno Smith is their quarterback and he sucks. And then he goes on and proves he's really not that bad. And Sam Darnold is their quarterback and he sucks. And then he goes on to prove that he's really not that bad. Who knows? Maybe Zach Wilson deserves a second shot. It worked for the other guys. Man, this is New York. This is not Boulder, Colorado. Again, nobody cares if Colorado wins the game or loses the game. In New York, that's all they care about. Again, Aaron Rodgers had the exact same statistics this past year that he had his last year in Green Bay. In 2022 in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers threw for 26 touchdowns. Last year, Aaron threw for 28. Aaron threw for 12 interceptions his last year in Green Bay. 11 last year. Aaron threw for more yards per game with the Jets, and had a higher QBR, 48-41. After the 2022 season, the Jets did whatever Aaron asked in order to get him to become the quarterback. They flew the owner, the coach, the general manager, the offensive coordinator, whom they hired to be Aaron's coach, out to California to go beg Aaron to play for them. Aaron puts up roughly the exact same statistical season last year, and they fire him. Does that make sense to anybody? Like, does that make any sense? And again, what the Jets are trying to tell themselves is, we're not the problem. Aaron was the problem. We're not the problem. Robert Saleh is the problem. We're not the problem. Joe Douglas was the problem. But the issue with the Jets is every single person that is with the Jets goes somewhere else and does better. Todd Bowles has been the head coach in Tampa Bay for 3 years, and for 3 years, Tampa Bay has made the playoffs. But he wasn't any good with the Jets. So, again, please put Shedeur Sanders in New York, because it will be such an unmitigated train wreck that I can't wait to watch it. And I saw that and I was like, oh my God, a TV player who might not be that good going to a TV team that always does stupid stuff, which is why they are the butt of every joke on TV. With a TV dad, what could go wrong? With a rookie head coach who's on the defensive side of the ball, with a lappy general manager who's only there to suck up to the coach, with a crazy owner who listens to his teenage sons, what could possibly go wrong? Oh, I love it. I just love it. So I saw that in Mel's mock draft. And again, I know there's a lot of people out there that think that Shedeur is very good. You know, somebody texted in and said, why are you mad at Shedeur? I'm not mad at Shedeur. I'm just not convinced Shedeur is any good. But man, everybody tells me every time I say that I'm not sure Shedeur Sanders is good because, you know, he didn't win any games in college, and or at least any meaningful games in college or anything like that. It's like, oh, Jared, you're a hater. You hate him. You don't. I'm just not convinced he's all that good. So let's put him in New York. See what happens. Boy, that'll end up well. 615-737-1025. So I don't have a lot of respect for Adam Schefter, but there is something that Adam Schefter said that is good news for the Titans, and it is good news because he said it. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. Predators fans, do not miss tomorrow night's Smashville Live at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 o'clock. See your Predators star players up close and personal, and also get autographs and pictures. And the Preds player guest will be Ryan O'Reilly. That's tomorrow night at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue.
much action are you? I know it's early, but is that number one pick a big topic of conversation with the Birds?
Well, it has been, yeah. I mean, it has been in the media for sure. Anytime you have number one pick, it's always going to be a topic of conversation. Yeah.
Has it gotten to a point where a lot of other teams are getting very nosy?
I would say we've had some phone calls. Yeah, I'll keep those phone calls to the vest, but we've had some phone calls, yeah.
Mike Borgonzi's had some phone calls. Breaking news. Again, not that big of a deal. But there is something that is a big deal. And it's the role the media plays in all of this. So this is the time of the year where the media matters more than they do during the regular season. During the actual football season, the teams are essentially set. Now, there may be some player movement, practice squad guy here or a little trade there. But again, for the most part, the media is kind of reacting to what we're seeing all throughout the week and then on Sunday. We react to what we see on Thursday, on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and we move on with our lives getting ready for next Sunday. But the offseason is not exactly like that. Player acquisition season. The guys that are important, the general managers, the coaches, the team presidents, these guys rely on media they can trust. And it is sort of a tit for tat kind of thing. For instance, I'll never forget Mike Silver a couple of years ago putting out there that the Titans were shopping Derrick Henry. And I thought, oh my God, what a rookie mistake by Rand Carthon. Because what happened was Mike Silver got that information from somebody whom the Titans probably approached about a Derrick Henry trade. And Mike Silver reported it because that team said, let's give Mike Silver this information about the Titans. It really has nothing to do with us, but it's something he can write about. Let's give that to Mike Silver. And then Mike Silver will tell us what he knows. So Adam Schefter on his podcast was talking about the Cleveland Browns and the second overall pick. And the fact that Adam Schefter thinks this and is telling everybody who will listen that he thinks this is a massively important to the Titans. Here's what Adam said.
But the thing that I feel most comfortable and confident in this upcoming draft is that the Cleveland Browns at number 2 will wind up taking a quarterback because they have to, because logic dictates that, because common sense dictates that, because they have Deshaun Watson, who you don't even know is going to be able to play again in the upcoming season, hurt, having undergone another surgery on his torn Achilles. You have all the money invested in him. So you need financial relief and you need a quarterback. And the only way to do that is to be able to do it at number 2. And so if the Titans decide that they're not going to go quarterback and they're going to go with a generational player like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, that leaves the Cleveland Browns with the option of whichever quarterback they deem to be the best quarterback in this upcoming draft. So to me, when we go over all these questions about the upcoming draft, the one thing that I feel completely comfortable and confident in predicting is that the Cleveland Browns will go quarterback at number 2, in part because they need to, in part because they have to, and in part because it makes all the sense in the world that they're going to. The Cleveland Browns, quarterback at number 2. Put it down for me, Ty.
Okay. Now, again, his opinion about Cleveland going quarterback at number 2 is the exact same opinion that I have, which is Cleveland's already paying Deshaun Watson $46 million. There's nothing they can do about that. So you can't necessarily go pay for a quarterback, because if you pay Matthew Stafford $50 million, now you're spending almost $100 million at the quarterback position. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think Cleveland's going to go quarterback at number 2. But it doesn't mean the same when it comes from me as it does from Adam Schefter. And we live in a headline society. People no longer care about the context anymore of what is said or what is meant. Aaron Rodgers got basically ambushed by a paparazzi guy with a phone for TMZ last week. Aaron Rodgers was asked, what do you value in your next team? He said, well, you got to be wanted. And what else? And they have to be a good team. And every headline ran out there with Aaron Rodgers says he wants to be on a good team next year. Again, Aaron just got ambushed in the parking lot leaving the gym. It wasn't like Aaron held a press conference, but that's not what the headline made it out to be. So the headline is Adam Schefter is confident Cleveland is picking a quarterback at number 2. Again, he was just filling time on his podcast. His confidence in them picking a quarterback doesn't seem based on what I'm hearing, but more so just the subjectivity of deductive reasoning. The same thing that I believe. But all it takes is for one of these morons that runs one of these teams to hear, did you hear Schefter says Cleveland's going quarterback at 2? Now imagine this. You're the New York Giants. You just hired Matthew Stafford's brother-in-law on your coaching staff. You are hoping to be able to get Matthew Stafford, but you also might not be able to. Maybe the Rams keep him. You got to have a plan B, right? Again, I have a hard time believing that teams view these quarterbacks the same. That is as simple as Ward or Sanders. I don't believe that. So you're New York at number 3. You've got to get the best possible quarterback or else you all lose your jobs. Did you hear? Adam Schefter says Cleveland's going quarterback at 2. Let's use Blake Bedingfield at paulkaharski.com, the former Titans director of college scouting. Blake Bedingfield says he has a first-round grade on Cam Ward. Not a high first-round grade, but he's got a first-round grade on Cam Ward. He's got a second-round grade on Shedeur Sanders. That means to him, there's a 1 quarterback. You're the Giants. Plan A is Stafford. Plan B has to be the draft. Can't be Daniel Jones. Can't be Sam Darnold. So you've got to have plan B. Did you hear? Adam Schefter is confident Cleveland is going quarterback at number 2. Doesn't that, if you're the Giants, make you at least want to pick up the phone, at least want to have one of your guys bump into one of their guys, and let's just see? Again, if you're going to mortgage your career on one of these 2 quarterbacks, don't you want it to be the one that you want? And if Cleveland's going quarterback at number 2, there's only one way to guarantee that you get the quarterback you want. You have to trade with me. So again, I was in the room when Chad Brinker made his generational talent comments a month ago. It was not some sort of declarative statement. It was not some sort of foreshadowing as to what the Titans were going to do with the number 1 pick. And yet, because Adam Schefter tweeted it, people inside the league took it as some sort of proclamation. So when Adam Schefter, again, the headline is, he is confident Cleveland is going quarterback at number 2. That does affect how people who actually make the decisions on trading for the first pick or drafting a quarterback, it actually does affect what they may do. And Borgonzi says, yeah, we've taken some phone calls. I'm going to leave it at that. He says that because right now they're waiting for the market to materialize. This is where you find out who actually wants your pick, because the old man told us that's exactly what you do at the combine. Here's what he said when he used to be on our program.
If you are interested in making a trade and you know who you want to trade for and the other team is, you'll try to passively bump into them, get an idea of maybe what they're thinking about a trade. And then if there's other players on other teams that you're interested in, you may try to bump into that agent, which is not legal.
Okay. So he's telling you, hey, at the combine, if you want to make a trade, you may bump into that guy and just say, hey, did you hear what Adam Schefter said? No, what did Adam Schefter say? Adam Schefter said he's confident Cleveland's going quarterback at number 2. Did you hear that? You're Joe Shane. You're the general manager of the Giants. The first year on the job, you made the playoffs. You gave Daniel Jones a contract extension. You franchise tagged Saquon Barkley. You thought you won the negotiation because the going rate for quarterbacks is $50 million. You got Daniel Jones for $40 million. You felt like you were going to work out a long-term deal with Saquon Barkley. You never did. But you don't think running back matters that much, so you let Saquon Barkley walk in free agency. Saquon Barkley went to the Philadelphia Eagles, had a record-setting season, and won the Super Bowl. How do you feel now? Oh, and by the way, your only get-out-of-jail-free card, the only shot that you may have, Cleveland might take him one spot ahead of you. Did you hear what Schefter said? So, again, I don't think Adam Schefter, when it comes to these insiders, I think the whole insider game is so dirty. You know, Ian Rappaport on Super Bowl Sunday, just to fill time, went on TV and said that the Titans are open to moving the number one pick. Well, no crap. They said it a month before that. But he treated it like it was some real news because that's his job, is to give NFL Network on TV some news and make it sound like it's fresh. Make it sound like it's real. But I'm also not going to knock the fact that Ian Rappaport is the league insider for the league-owned TV network. I'm not going to knock the fact that Adam Schefter, in spite of the fact that Adam Schefter only knows what people are willing to tell him, that Adam Schefter is viewed as somebody with extensive knowledge of the inner workings of the league. So when he says, I'm confident in this, there are going to be a lot of people around the league that look up and say, ooh, did you hear what Schefter said? I don't think Pete Carroll's going to react like that in Vegas, but I definitely think Joe Shane in New York might. I definitely think the morons with the Jets might. So that is good news. If you have the first pick and you want to trade out, and there is one quarterback who is clearly QB1, and it is Ward. The consensus is Ward is QB1. And if that is the case, and everybody thinks Cleveland's going to take him number 2 because Adam Schefter said it, oh my God. Oh my God, it's great news for the Titans. So Schefty, good work. Again, he's just filling time on his podcast. He's just sitting there saying, you know, here's what I think's going to happen. It's the same as me making a mock draft. But it matters more because it came from Schefter. One texter says, man, what would you do or how would you feel if the Titans did something stupid like trade with the Browns and then the Titans ended up with Deshaun Watson? That is impossible. So I'm not going to address that. That will not happen. One texter says, the Floyd drops are always gold. Thank you for the nugget. We will have more Floyd drops later today on the program for those of you looking around. But I do love this this Cam Ward stuff. It's like, did you hear what Adam Schefter said? Because again, when it comes to what Adam Schefter's saying, I don't care what Adam Schefter thinks. When I'm watching TV, and again, there is a quantity element to the insiders. Right? There's always a pregame show on Sunday, which means these guys always have to have something to say. For Schefter, there's always Sports Center hits. There's always going on Pat McAfee. There's always doing these appearances. Well, it's like I say, 4 hours are 4 hours for this program. 4 hours on July 16th before training camp is open. It's the same 4 hours as 4 hours the Monday after the Titans win the Super Bowl. It's the same. Well, Schefter, it's the same way. But if Schefter doesn't have any information, then he has to go up there and he has to start speculating. And when I'm watching TV and they're like, Schefty, what is the latest with Aaron Rodgers? And he starts saying, well, I think, I'm like, okay, I don't need to listen to this. So I don't really care what Schefter thinks. But the fact that, again, the headline's going to be Adam Schefter, confident Cleveland goes quarterback. It's going to lead to this belief, even inside the league, that Cleveland is going quarterback at 2. And that is good news for the people that have the number 1 pick. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And there's a hard question that's going to be asked on this program. We're going to have to get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Nashville's best deal is for the fine folks at Barrio Burrito Bar in Murfreesboro. At Barrio Burrito Bar, every bite is a celebration of fresh ingredients, vibrant spices, and bold flavors, dancing on your taste buds like a fiesta in your mouth. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get half off a $25 gift card while supplies last.
My thought on it now, Joe, is like at some point along the way here, he needs to have proven that he can fix this mess. And I don't think he's done that this year. Now, I'm not saying that he totally can't, but this is basically 56 games at this point of the same stuff. Like they can't score. They haven't been able to score all year, with the exception of about a 3-week span from early January to late January. They have not been able to defend well all year. And this is, I mean, we talked about it when we were talking about UC Saros. This is how you end up 30th in the league, when you're doing a lot of things really poorly. The power play has not been as effective as it should be with the names that they've got on paper. And I think at some point, if you're going to save your job, like, you've got to prove that you've got an idea to fix this heading into next year. And I don't know that he's done that to this point.
That was Robbie this morning talking about Andrew Burnett. I said yesterday on the program, I said, look, I like Andrew Burnett. I think Andrew Burnett is a good coach. But I don't see any way he can keep his job. I don't think there's enough pliability of the roster for them to make some kind of big hockey move to really reset the team after the contracts they signed last offseason. I'm also not convinced that the players they signed are as bad as they have been this year. I'm not convinced the players they have are as bad as they've been this year. And so I don't know how Andrew Burnett's going to keep his job. But Barry Trotz is going to join us at 5 o'clock today. Again, now that the Predators are back on the ice, we restart our weekly conversations with Barry Trotz. And I'm just going to tell you, there are going to be some hard questions asked today. Like, today is kind of the moment where I look back at the fact that I thought going into this, the Predators were going to be in the second or third spot in the division. Well, right now, Minnesota, coached by John Hines, is in third place with 72 points. The Predators have 47. And to Robbie's point, it's been 56 games of the same stuff. The same problems they're having right now are the same problems they were having at the beginning of the year. Like, I thought this was a funk. I thought they'd shake themselves out of it, and I thought they'd go on about their business and they'd be okay. And that's not what's happened this year. And the other thing that I'm going to have to ask Barry Trotz about is, right now, when it comes to the fans' hope for this franchise right now, it is as low as it was 2 years ago before David Poile announced that he was stepping away. When the team had been smoked by Colorado in the playoffs, they didn't look like they were going to make the playoffs, and there was a fear amongst us that they were actually going to buy at the trade deadline instead of sell. And when David Poile announced that he was stepping aside, and they made the trades of Nino Niederreiter and Tanner Jeannot and Matthias Ekholm and all those trades, Preds fans were given hope and optimism again. That's gone. Right now, I mean, I'm having a hard time figuring out where the hope is, because they're stuck with the older players they have right now that aren't playing very well. They have young players on their team who aren't playing very well and don't seem to be the future. Tommy Novak, no. Luke Evangelista's had a bad season. The defense is a complete and total mess. I mean, some of these guys, they just freaking suck. Like this number 20, he sucks. The guys that have been here that are supposed to be good players, Roman Josi, he stunk it up. Saros, he's stinking it up. I mean, where is the hope? Where is the hope for this fan base? And so I have to ask these questions. It's not fun, but that's the job. And that's the thing about this show that you will always get, is we will always ask these questions. That's just how it is. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number on the program, 615-737-1025. The Titans general manager, Mike Borgonzi, met with the media today. And boy, a lot of what I heard they're doing is a lot of what I've heard before. And that's not a bad thing. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 105 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, Bridgestone Arena, where the Predators take on the defending Cup champion Florida Panthers tonight, right here at 7 o'clock. Barry Trotz in 1 hour, right here on our program. Meanwhile, the Titans, and we are, by the way, presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. The Titans, meanwhile, are at the NFL Scouting Combine, and our coverage of the Combine is presented by the fine folks at the New Cumberland Nationals Resort-style community overlooking downtown on the Cumberland River. So, gosh, it must have been 2 days ago, 3 days ago. I don't even remember how this came up, why this came up, but I was talking to my dad, and I said to him, knowing what you know now, who do you think could do a better job as general manager of the Tennessee Titans? Me or Rand Carthon? Now, Ian, you know my dad, and I've heard Robbie and Joe talk about this before because they know my dad. My dad is not me. So this idea that like my dad has these crazy opinions or flies off the handle or is totally irrational or Ian, that's not my dad.
No.
And so I asked him, like, again, voice of reason. I'm like, do you think like that? And he said, well, he goes, I mean, it's hard to believe that you could have done worse. And I said to him, I go, the reason I think I could have done better is not because I think I'm some sort of football savant or that I know the game or anything like that, but there's just maxims that I learned over the years from doing the show with Floyd every day that like, oh, when this situation comes up, I feel like I know how he would have approached it based on some sort of life lesson. And he generally agreed with that. And you guys know a lot of those instances, right? Like the right tackle story and the fact for the last 3 years, the Titans have just been winging it at right tackle. And every day I've told the story about the first day I worked with Floyd. I said to the Titans, he said, we don't have a right tackle. You all know that. But it's more than just that. That's just an example of something that if I was GM and I went into the meetings and I said, all right, what are we going to do at right tackle? And they said, we're going to put Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT at right tackle. I said, no, we're not doing that. There are other things that I have learned about the draft, about working with people, about management structure, etc. Building a football operation, just from sitting here every day and listening. We used to run on Fridays on the old Jared and the GM program during the draft season, the Floyd Reich Draft Academy. And I don't know about you, Ian, but I felt like that was one of the most educational segments we ever did. And every time we did it, just got massively positive reviews.
Fair.
And I say that because today I was listening to Mike Borgonzi's press conference. And the opening press conference when somebody gets hired, it's always the same. It's the most meaningless press conference. Every time someone gets hired, it's we're going to be the hardest working team and we're going to get the best players and we're going to scout and we're going to trade and we're going to give you a team to be proud of. Yay! Everybody can do that. I mean, it's like a political rally. We're going to lower your taxes. We're going to make more money for you. It's different when you have a record now that people are challenging. So Mike Borgonzi's been the general manager of the Titans for a month. And I know what my core value system is of running a football team because the guy who I used to work with did it very successfully for a long period of time. In fact, he's the best general manager in the history of the Tennessee Titans. And so I think about some of the things that matter to me that seem to have not mattered to the Titans in the past. The first, this is what Floyd talked about as far as going to the combine and knowing the offseason and free agency and the role it plays in the draft. Here's what Floyd once said about the importance of free agency and the draft.
Where's the strength of this group? What is the real bonus area in this unrestricted free agency group? And wherever that is, you can't, you're going to try. If you really need a corner, you're going to try to make somebody a corner, but you have to be smart enough to look at it and say, hey, there aren't any corners. Okay, safeties. Yeah, there's a safety. Outside linebacker. Yeah, there are 4 outside linebackers. Well, after you go through all these positions, what you will be able to do is you will be able to say, okay, the strengths of unrestricted free agency are right here. Now you go back to the draft. Draft time comes around, and we've already said we've gone to the combine now, and we're going back to our board and restacking our board. As we're doing this, we're looking at the draft and we're saying, okay, the strengths of the draft are here. They are at corner. They are at receiver. They are at defensive lineman. And by coordinating the pro board, its strengths, and your draft board and its strengths, you end up deciding which way you're going to have to go to get people.
I've always believed that. Last year on the program, we had free agent boards. And that's how we knew the difference between Darnell Mooney and Calvin Ridley. And we knew that Tyler Boyd was a slot receiver. We knew he wasn't going to run down the field because we had done the work as far as what the free agent values were. That's how we knew that Jermaine Illuminor was out there as a right tackle in unrestricted free agency, because we knew the strengths of free agency and the strengths of the draft, because that's a core value I believe in. Mike Borgonzi today.
We're trying to fill, probably as many holes as we can before the draft. And you're trying to see, at this point, you have a free agency board, you have a draft board. You're trying to see the depth in free agency and the depth in the draft and where you might be able to acquire those players. But you certainly want to try to fill as many holes as you can in free agency. And, we have some work to do on the roster.
That sound like what we heard from the old man? I mean, again, to me, it sounds like the exact same philosophy. Okay, what about changing the board? Now the board is set. How about the differences? They're going to the combine. How much do you move these guys up and down the board based upon what happens at the combine? Here's what Floyd said. How much does your mind change on prospects based upon what you see here at the combine?
Not that much. Doesn't go up much. It may go down depending on what happens. It'll change more on what a scout tells me than it will on a performance.
Mm-hmm.
If I expect a guy to perform at an A level, he comes in and performs at a C level, I'll want to talk to the scout. What happened here? What is he hurt? Did he have a surgery? Is he, he was a little bit overweight. Why is he overweight? And get a background on him. And if it's somebody, like I said, you expect to perform at an A, he performed at a C, and it's because he was overweight and out of shape, and he's been overweight and out of shape for the beginning of the past 2 seasons, and it's taken a while to work into shape. Well, now you know a little bit more about that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And your opinion, if you had him rated, at a certain spot, it will drop based on all that information.
Mike Borgonzi today on the movement of the draft board after the combine.
We try not to make drastic changes, Paul, on it. But some of the medical information obviously will affect that. Some of the testing does move guys up and down the board a little bit. But we try not to make drastic measures. We want to be a tape-driven team and really not just depend on these other variables that come in.
Doesn't it sound kind of similar? Which is like, hey, we get to the combine, we do the medical. Oh, he's got a bad elbow. Well, we're going to have to drop him down the board. But this idea that, oh, my God, he ran a 4.2 and we had him as a 3rd rounder, make him a 1st rounder. They're not going to do that. Floyd's not going to do that. Mike Borgonzi's not going to do that. And this is why it gives me hope. Because for the last couple of years, and this isn't just the Rand Carthon era, this includes some of the end of the John Robinson era too. There were certain decisions that were made by the Titans that I knew in my heart went against the core philosophies with which the old man had instilled in me. The Julio Jones trade, I was never going to say it at the time because I didn't feel like that was fair to say, oh, well, here's what the old man who's not speaking for himself would have believed, but he never would have traded for a 31-year-old wide receiver with a bad hamstring. He never would have drafted Caleb Farley. Now, you wouldn't draft Jeffrey Simmons with him as the general manager either, but I think you can live with that. Because, again, those are the philosophies. When the Titans took a guard with the 11th overall pick, I thought, you have to be freaking kidding me. And everybody kept saying, but Jared, he's a plug-and-play player. You'll see. Jared, we need, well, what's the thing? The guard, center guard. That's more important now than the tackles. And you want to know what I heard every time the Titans tried to pull some bull crap like that? Every time they tried to put a 270-pound center in there, every time all I heard in my head was, ha, 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 ha. That's why people talk about the Titans and Trey Smith. If Mike Borgonzi's organizational philosophies align with mine and with the old man's, they're not going to pay Trey Smith $20 million a year to play guard. They're done with paying $20 million to a guard. They're done with using the 11th pick on a guard. They're done with showing up to training camp hoping to figure it out at right tackle. Again, that's what gives me hope listening to Mike Borgonzi talk, the way he's setting up the organization, the way he's running the organization. His philosophies align with the philosophies that I know work. And I know the Titans were doing it a different way, the San Francisco way, and you'll see, Jared, you'll see. I know. But I knew in my heart, when that way equals a guard with the 11th pick, it's not going to work. When Mike Vrabel goes to New England and has final say on a roster when he's never worked in personnel before, I know that's not going to work. Now the Titans have somebody in there who, again, at least the way he's setting things up, work. Now, that doesn't mean that he can identify, if we give him 5 right tackles, that he can identify the best right tackle. And he's not going to identify the best right tackle every single time. But the process with which they go about doing it used to be extremely flawed based on my values of how to run a football team. The non-negotiables that I would have if I was GM, and it seems like he's the same way. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? That's because this guy comes from John Dorsey, who was an old school football guy, who was buddies with Floyd. He comes from Andy Reid, who is an old school football guy, who was buddies with Floyd. And guess what? I know people love the new age way. Did you know the Rams don't even go to this combine? Great. No, Jared, we don't need to go to the Senior Bowl. You'll see. Uh-huh. Again, I couldn't believe that. I could not believe the idea of the general manager not going to the Senior Bowl because it did not align with my philosophy. Did you notice this general manager went to the Senior Bowl? Did you notice that? It gives me hope that the Titans have returned to competence because there were too many things that absolutely violated everything I knew about how to build a successful NFL team. And that's why the Mike Borgonzi press conference today actually gave me some hope. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Can the Titans sign a quarterback in free agency? Can they draft one? Borgonzi did talk about that. We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 1025 The Game.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important time for us. You get in, early in the morning before the sun's up, and you're out of the building when the sun's down. So that's what he's referring to, and it's going into darkness, is what we call it. But it's an important time for just to build camaraderie with the staff, creating bonds with the staff as well. And so we did that for the past months, which I think was great.
That was my Borgonzi again, apparently saying we show up when it's dark outside, we leave when it's dark outside. That's how hard we're working. That's actually not funny to me, because I remember last year Rand Carthon checking in for work at he was clocking in at like 7:15, 7:20 in the morning. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, could you imagine if Floyd Reese saw the general manager of the Titans going into work at 7 a.m.? I mean, this was somebody that got to work at like 3 a.m. and left at 11 p.m. And look, football's probably not that serious, but it is to these guys. That's what makes them good. It is to these guys. And so it does feel to me like there is some competence that has returned to the Titans when I listen to Mike Borgonzi not tell me what he's going to do, because he's not going to say that. He's not going to say today like, oh, yeah, we're going to take Abdul Carter with the first pick. He's not going to say that. But the process with which they will decide who to take at number one or how to trade away at number one sounds a lot better than the processes the Titans were using, which was, well, we really wanted to keep Danico Autry and Aziz, but when we didn't, we said, screw it, let's go sign Calvin Ridley. That's not really a plan. That's just doing crap. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Mike from PA says, I do not want to get ahead of myself, but it sounds like we have a grown-up again. Someone who's doing the job instead of playing the job. Again, Rand's not here anymore, and there's a reason why Rand's not here anymore. But the reason the team was so bad was because, as I kept saying, it looked like somebody who didn't really know what they were doing was doing the job. And when you don't know what you're doing, that's how you make the bad decisions that they made. That's how you draft a guard with the 11th overall pick. Or relying on a rookie head coach to help you with the personnel side of things. Like, the old man would have never done that. The old man did not rely on Jeff Fisher to help him make decisions. And when he did, they were bad decisions, like Lindale White over Devin Hester. So again, when it comes to what I believe, the values that I have for how to run a football organization, this guy seems to get them. Missing the Senior Bowl. I remember, oh my God, Ian, I feel like I'm traumatized when I talk about some of these events that have happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll like just the vitriol when I'm like, timeout. The general manager didn't go to the Senior Bowl. You don't understand, Jared. It's 2024. You don't need to go to the Senior Bowl anymore. No, you need to go to the Senior Bowl. Give me a break. General manager doing interviews during practice. By the way, speaking of the Rand showing up for work at 7:15 in the morning, I was talking to Floyd's daughter-in-law about that. I said, did I tell you that Rand was GM? He showed up for work one time at 7:20 in the morning. She said, she goes, I can't think of a time that Floyd did that. It may have been close when I had my son at 2 a.m. in the morning and he came at 6 to visit for the first time in the hospital and then left when we were in New England. So Floyd came in at 6 o'clock after the birth of his grandson, said, good to see you, Johnny, and left and went back to work. Unbelievable. That is, again, real football people. And again, I have no idea what Floyd would think of Mike Borgonzi. And I have no idea if Mike Borgonzi can evaluate who's a good quarterback, who's not. But I do know this. I do know Floyd would have a lot of respect for where he comes from, which is John Dorsey, who was the general manager in Kansas City when Borgonzi was there at the beginning, and Andy Reid. And I know he had a lot of respect for both guys because at the combine in the past, I've sat down with both guys who came on this show because they're friends with Floyd. One texter says, Rand lost me when he talked about it being a special day for the players during the draft. That was a big moment. And I keep forgetting about some of these Rand Carthon moments where I'm sitting there thinking to myself, did the general manager just try to do that? Did the general manager of the Tennessee Titans just tell the media to be more positive with the questions they're asking after making 2 controversial draft choices? One texter says Rand Carthon's incompetence costs the Titans CJ Stroud at quarterback. I don't know if that's the case. What I do know is it probably cost you Brock Bowers last year. Like, again, Latham's a good player or looks like he'll be a good player. Bowers looks like he'll be a special player. But again, when you don't know what you're doing and you're like, well, we didn't get any tackles in free agency, so we got to take a tackle, you end up losing Brock Bowers. Trevor Maddich joins us next. We got a lot of combine to get into with Trevor. We got Mel Kiper's latest mock draft to get into with Trevor, and we will do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. The Combine is underway. Our coverage of the Combine all week long, presented by New Cumberland Nationals resort-style community overlooking downtown on the Cumberland River. Trevor Maddich joins us now on the program, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. When experience matters. Trevor, today Adam Schefter said he is confident the Cleveland Browns will use the number 2 overall pick on a quarterback. Now, it sounded like subjective reasoning from Adam Schefter and not objective reporting from Adam Schefter. But again, the headline for me that teams around the league will hear is Adam Schefter confident Cleveland goes quarterback at 2. What does that mean for the Titans and their trade possibilities if that's what everybody seems to believe?
Well, that would be fantastic for the Titans and trade possibilities, because you've got teams behind Cleveland that also need a quarterback that may draft one of those top 2. Right behind them, you've got the Giants at number 3. And so if the Giants, for example, love Cam Ward and they think that Adam Schefter means that the Browns will take Cam Ward, then it may be that they'll offer more than they should to the Titans in order to swap from 3 to number 1. And so it just creates all kinds of possibilities. And if you're the Titans, you want people to think that you're interested in the quarterbacks as well. Now, I'd be careful if I'm the Titans. Just moving back to number 3 to get a few more picks, I'd be real careful, because I still think Abdul Carter is far and away the best of the potential picks for them at number 1. And then certainly if they don't get Abdul Carter, I'd want to make sure that I've got absolute playmakers in there somewhere. But boy, if I'm the Titans, I am loving it that Adam Schefter reported that the Cleveland Browns are interested in drafting a quarterback, because that tells me that the Giants or somebody below them, the Jets, or maybe even the Raiders, might want to jump up to number 1 to get a quarterback. Because as far as they're concerned, if the Titans do their job well, the Titans will make everybody believe that they want a quarterback as well. Mm-hmm. And so if the Titans and the Browns make everyone think that Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are going to be gone with the first 2 picks, it creates all kinds of opportunities for the Titans at number 1.
Trevor, do you view Ward and Sanders in the same class? Because I hear a lot of talk about how most people seem to have Sanders below Ward, like second round grade for some when it comes to Sanders. It seems like pretty much a lot of people have first round grade on Cam Ward. Do you think that there's a difference between the two, and that it really could be as simple as, hey, if you want Cam Ward, you have to get the number 1 because Cleveland will take him at number 2, and Shedeur Sanders is not in the same discussion as Cam Ward? Or is it as simple as, if you don't get Cam Ward, you can just get Shedeur Sanders?
If I had to pick between the 2, I'd take Cam Ward of Miami. He is the better thrower. The question is, what do you want as a team out of your quarterback? And just because a guy can make some outstanding throws doesn't mean he's going to be a great quarterback. I mean, you had guys that threw the ball spectacularly well at times, with Richardson of the Colts and Justin Fields, who was drafted by the Bears, and they gave up on him, and now it looks like Steelers are probably giving up on him. But man, those guys made some amazing throws. But there's a difference between being a thrower and being a quarterback. And between the 2, I think that Cam Ward probably has the more gifted arm. And I think that Shedeur Sanders probably is more capable of dissecting a defense. So it just depends on what you want to do. If I had to pick one, I would roll the dice on the arm, and I would take Cam Ward.
Trevor, Brian Callahan said today that they will be talking to every quarterback when it comes to the Combine in Indianapolis. And there are 3 names that kind of stand out to me that I've been hearing a lot more chatter for. Well, 2 names I've heard with more chatter that I want your opinion on, and a third that I just can't get over. The first is Tyler Shuck at Louisville. I watched him play every game. I like Tyler Shuck, but know about the NFL. Kyle McCord at Syracuse, and Will Howard at Ohio State, who doesn't seem to be getting a lot of buzz, but man, he was impressive in that Ohio State title run. So what do you think of those 3 and how it compares to, say, these other 2?
Yeah, I think that you got to decide which flaws you want to try to coach out of them. When you talk about Tyler Shuck of Louisville, he's a big guy. He's got a terrific arm, but he didn't get the ball out quickly. It took him a long time to figure out where he wanted to throw it. And in college football, you can kind of get away with that. In the NFL, the pass rushers will get there too quickly. And you've got to be able to process information quickly. And whether or not, Tyler Shuck got the ball out, it took him so long to get the ball out, was because he didn't decipher what he was seeing downfield, or whether it was because he was just trying to make big plays and things like that and held the ball longer than he had to. The scouting process is going to have to determine that. But that's what you'll have to coach out of him. From a standpoint of Kyle McCord out of Syracuse, he led college football in passing. I think he had over 4,000 passing yards this last year. And so he's got the ability to throw the ball. The thing I worry about is that he had a lot of open receivers and some really good receivers. And it was a lot harder for those receivers to make catches than really it should have been a lot of the time. I mean, you go back to Alabama. I mean, there was a few years ago, it might have even been Jalen Hurts. There might have been somebody before that. I did a illustrated breakdown on how he would get two stats on each pass. One was that he'd have a completion, and the other is that he would have a tackle. Because he would throw the ball behind an open receiver or too low or too high, and the receiver would have to contort himself to such a degree to make the catch that he would make the catch, but then he'd fall down. And so a wide open receiver would have a 20-yard catch, and it looks great in the box score, but it should have been a 20-yard catch plus run for another 20 at least, right? And so Kyle McCord was kind of that way, where, he threw for a ton of yards, but a lot of times his windows were awfully big. You'd have to coach him to be more precise on that. Will Howard of Ohio State he's an enigma, because when he had plenty of time to throw, he was amazing. I mean, in terms of his ability to put the ball into precise windows, he was much better than I think people expected him to be when he left Kansas State and transferred to Ohio State. But the bugaboo on him is two things. One is when he was under pressure, when you speeded up his process, his performance went way, way down. The other is that he had two elite running backs, and both of them will be in the NFL next year. Plus, he had an elite wide receiver core with multiple future first-rounders. Emeka Egbuka could be a first-rounder this year. And then, he's got that freshman that was just absolutely amazing last year who will be a first-rounder down the road. And so the question is, was he throwing to wide-open receivers that college defensive backs feared to the point that they backed way off of so that they would have plenty of room to throw the ball to him, so at least they wouldn't get beat over the top? Or was it that Will Howard was just that good? And these are things where his ceiling is pretty high. His floor, though, is a little scary, Will Howard, because if you put a lot of pressure on him and then you make him throw into tight windows, is he going to do better in the NFL than he did at Ohio State?
Mm-hmm. Trevor, what do we make about Abdul Carter's injury? They said that he played through it and he dominated in that Notre Dame game, but I am a little nervous about the injury with the shoulder. What do you make of it, and how important would the medical be for you on Abdul Carter?
That would be huge. I mean, if he's healthy, I even if people wanted to trade with me, I would still be inclined to want to take Abdul Carter with the number one pick. Unless they just sold the farm to make me an offer I can't refuse if I'm the Titans at number one to trade down and not take Abdul Carter there. But he's got to be healthy. And if he's not, if he's going to have a gimpy shoulder the entire time, think of what NFL coaches are going to do. Remember that in college, it's typically my system against your system. In the NFL, it's my guy against your guy. And everything that offenses do in the NFL in terms of formation, motion, shift, all those different things are to get this guy on that defender. That's what it's for. And defense is kind of the same way, where they move people around and they do different shifts and stunts to get that pass pressure on that offensive lineman or on that tight end or running back. So if you're an offense and you know Abdul Carter's there and he's an electrifying pass rusher, even with one arm, healthy and one injured, you are going to make him play a big, giant offensive tackle with two arms. And you're going to wear that gimpy arm down by running right at him until, he is literally dangling that arm. Now, he did dangle it against Notre Dame. It was his left arm And so they lined him up over the right tackle. Penn State did against Notre Dame. And he would rush over the right tackle with his injured left arm out in space on the outside and just use his speed, his explosiveness, and his inside arm, his right arm, to execute his pass rush moves. And he excelled at that. He was unstoppable with one arm. In the NFL, they're going to tear that injured arm right off his body and beat him with it if he can't use it well. So the combine for him, the process of evaluation has absolutely nothing to do with his capabilities. It is everything to do with the injury to that arm, because if you're taking the number one pick and you pick that guy right there or anybody else, you don't want there to be an injury risk.
Trevor Maddux is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. We have a new mock draft from Mel Kiper, which we will get into. And also, we have the combine itself, the workouts. Who is Trevor watching? Who could go up? Who could go down? We'll do it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
I'm big on Shador, but I think I understand why you would go away from it. Like I said, he doesn't have the wow factor. I understand that. And certainly, Cam Ward, you look at what he, in a draft that was a little stronger, be as highly rated as he is, or up there at the top. No, he would not. I get that. But to say that for Shador, for me, if I'm looking and I say I need a quarterback, yeah, I understand why people would have mixed views and mixed opinions within their front office on Shador. I've been a big Shador guy, but this is a mock draft. It's based on what you're hearing, and I think there's a chance that Shador can drop just a bit. And then we also have to factor in the trade possibility. With the Jets, say at the end of the day, we love Shador, but the Raiders could take him. The Jets could move ahead, maybe to Jacksonville at 5 or maybe to New England at 4 and get him. But I'm not projecting trades until mock 4.0 in April, but certainly that's not out of the realm of possibility that a trade up for Shador could possibly take place.
There you go. That was Mel Kiper Jr. talking about his latest mock draft that is out. Trevor Maddich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So, Trevor, I do want to hit a couple of thoughts in Mel's mock draft for you. Number one, let's start with Shador Sanders at 7 to the Jets. Trevor, I think that is a train wreck waiting to happen. Deion Sanders' kid going to New York, a place that has bad ownership, always seems to fail the quarterback. They blew it with Geno Smith. He's had a good second act. They blew it with Sam Darnold. He's had a good second act. And I just cannot imagine Shador Sanders having success. If Aaron Rodgers couldn't have success there, do you think there's a chance that Shador Sanders could have success there?
I think Shador Sanders will have success in the NFL. The degree is what remains, in question. But the Jets, like you said, Jared, you make a great point, because the Jets have been a place where quarterbacks and coaches have gone to see their careers either end or be damaged. And when you're a rookie like Shador, the temptations are extraordinary. I mean, beyond just the fact that the Jets as an organization have consistently failed to develop quarterbacks and to maximize quarterbacks' capability, they also are a franchise that is surrounded by distractions. And Shador Sanders, he's got his rap, music that he does. He's got all kinds of things that he does. Now, he has shown that at the college level, he's able to balance all those things. And his dad certainly knows that if there's any influence he could have on his son Shador, it would be to make the thing, and to not get distracted by all those extraneous things until he establishes himself as a quarterback. But if I'm Deion, if I'm the father, I'm thinking the Jets are probably the last place of the most likely places for him to go that I would want him to go, because, the whole axiom of first do no harm, for quarterbacks especially, but anybody in the NFL, the first thing you have to do is exclude everything that could take away from your ability to develop as a player. And then pick one or two things that you like to do that you could add to it, so you have a little bit of diversity in your life, and then go from there. And Shador would have to show that he can avoid those temptations, because, boy, to be a star in New York is the most heady thing for any young person ever, anyway. And so that is a huge distraction. Really, we talk about RG3 from time to time. If I were to give him advice when he came into Washington and first drafted, it would have been, okay, RG3, make a list of the things that you need to do to be a successful quarterback in this league. Then write down one or two things outside of football that you want to do, and then don't do anything else at all. Nothing. And RG3 wasn't able to get that done, and a lot of his outside distractions took away from his ability to do what he needed to do as a player. And I worry that Shador in New York, that would be a bad place, especially if the New York team is the Jets.
Trev, Mel has Will Campbell, the left tackle out of LSU, at 4 to New England, but there's a lot of talk about what his arm length will check in at the combine this week, that if it's under 33, he's got to move into guard. The Titans, if they trade back, could be in the market for a Will Campbell. What do we know about him, and how important would the arm length be for you?
Arm length is important if it is clearly a problem for you. And Will Campbell was absolutely phenomenal at LSU. I mean, he gave up very few sacks, very few pressures. He was very, very good in his athleticism, was able to make up for the fact that his arms We're short. You know, I've never measured his arms either, but they say they're about 33 inches, which is really short for a guy that's 6'6". But in order to make that work, you've got to stay in front of guys. And in the NFL, that's a lot harder to do consistently. You have to have recovery ability. In other words, in the NFL, as a tackle, especially a left tackle, you need to be able to get beat initially and then recover. And so your footwork is important with that. Your balance is important, but your arm length is important too, because you're going to have to reach out and push that guy. And if you can reach out and push him and you've got an extra 3 inches of length, you can push him by the quarterback. If you don't have that 3 inches of length, maybe he runs through the corner and gets to the quarterback. The thing that worries me about Will Campbell when you watch him on tape is that he plays very tall. He stands up pretty straight. Now, he's shown great strength doing that. He's shown the ability to perform at a high level doing that. But again, in the NFL, if I'm a pass rusher and I see a guy that is kind of standing up straight, especially if he has shorter arms, I don't care about his ability to move. I'm going speed to power every time. And I'm going to stick one arm right in the middle of his chest. He won't be able to reach me, but I've got my arm on him now, and I'm going to drive him back because he's already standing up, and I already have great leverage. I'm not saying that Will Campbell can't play, but at number 4, I would not want to be taking him that high.
Yeah. And then I saw Mel has Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State, at 6. Let me say this. The guy was, had stats similar to that of Barry Sanders, and I think we can all say Barry Sanders is pretty good. But is 6 a little too rich? Is he good enough as a running back to go with the 6th pick in the draft?
I think he is to a team that that could use a running back. We're not drafted for position for the most part around here, but if you've got a running back and then another position and then another position that are all kind of similar in their grade that you have them on, then you probably don't want to take the running back. Saquon Barkley notwithstanding. But the thing about Genty is that he's a really good blocker. He's a really good receiver out of the backfield. And he's excellent at slipping a tackle or two, making guys miss. And once he slips a tackle, his burst from kind of 0 where he made that guy miss to full speed out the door is electrifying. And so he is like Saquon Barkley in that he can turn a 4-yard gain into a 15-yard gain and a 15-yard gain into an 80-yard touchdown. And that's the reason you would consider taking him that high.
Trevor Maddich, as always, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics. When experience matters, Trevor, we look forward to talking next week when we will have all of the combine breakdown and results and everything else behind us.
Great. Looking forward to it, Jared. Thanks, man.
Yep, Trevor Maddich, as always, on our program. Predators General Manager Barry Trotz will join us coming up next. And I need some hope. And we will do that. Stillman and Company, 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Bridgestone Arena Predators and the defending Cup champion Florida Panthers tonight, 7 o'clock. We're presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee and joined now by Predators General Manager Barry Trotz. First of all, long time no see. It's been a second, so good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while. Obviously, with the Four Nation break, that we miss each other.
So I want to start with this, Barry. I need some hope. I was at the game on Sunday. It was a tough one. The season has not gone the way I expected it to go. I assume not the way you expected it to go. I look at a team that doesn't have a ton of roster pliability because of some of the longer contracts. I look at a team that's having the same problems today that I felt like the team was having a couple of months ago. What's the hope here for me and other fans like me?
Well, I think a couple things. I think our roster stabilized a little bit, and I'm probably going to make it unstable again with the trade deadline. We're going to continue to try to add some youth to our group. I'm going to try to collect some assets if I can. I've talked to all our top players and say, listen, let's, when they came back from the great break, let's be quite honest. If here's sort of a little bit of the plan, what I'm thinking next couple of years. Are you in? Then if you are, then that's great. If you're not, then let me know and I'll make a move. And so right now, I'm just concerned how we play from now to the end of the year. You can't control the wins and losses, but you can control your effort. You can control your, how you play. That you're going to run into teams that are, they're going to be just better rosters right now. And so it doesn't mean that you lay down and let them roll over you. You make sure you battle. So that part I'm looking at for us. And then, you see a guy like Svechkov playing with Stamkos and Nyquist. That's sort of what we envisioned happening, but maybe not as soon as right now. But that type of stuff where you see a young guy with, say, two veterans, and then hopefully, a year from now, maybe there's two young guys and one veteran, and we keep going down the list. But we're gonna try to be a little more flexible with what we do from now to the trade deadline. I've picked up, there's a lot of transactions you see Nashville picking up.
Sure.
Guys like Denisenko and people like that.
I get the emails from Barn about people I've never heard of.
Yeah, and I know it's not. That's the one of the things that we're doing is we're collecting players because of the fact that we have 8 guys from Milwaukee that are hurt. We got 4 guys hurt. We're probably going to move out a couple guys, so we need players, plain and simple. So a lot of that stuff when you see transactions, a lot of those are just we got to fill roster spots. We got to continue to have guys in Milwaukee, and we also got to continue to have guys that can come up and play for us that have a little bit of experience. So we're doing a little bit of that right now, and we'll look at the trade deadline, getting a lot of calls on some guys, but there's not going to be a game changer in that one.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be just setting the roster up for going forward through free agency and what we try to do in the offseason.
So you talked about having a talk with some of the veteran players about kind of what the future may hold. What did you tell them about how the future is now different than it was before?
Well, it hasn't changed a lot, but I think everybody came here with the expectations we'd do a little bit better. Some of them weren't very realistic, as I said in the past, but I thought we'd be closer to the wild card, a playoff spot than we are. You're only as good as your best players. Well, our best players haven't been our best players, and that goes from, I can go from goal, from Saros to Yossi to Shea to Stamkos to Marshall, so I can go right down the list. There's no one having a career year, so I just said, if you can't, recover, or you don't feel that you want to be here, or you don't like the direction we're going, let me know, because I have no problem moving you. So it was just it was a good talk, but they want to fix it. I think they realized that it didn't happen for us this year, and things went south and we couldn't get it back on. So we're going to see if we can get this back on the rails where we want it to, and go from there.
Is it fair to say that group, and I'll just name names, and I know you won't, but Forsberg, Yossi, Stamkos, Marchessault, Brady Shea, Saros, that when you sit down with these guys and say, hey, like, you know, we're trying to get out of this next year. You know, do you want to be here? Do you not want to be here? Was there any pushback of saying like, hey man, I don't think we can do that here. I would like to be
No,
somewhere
not at
else. Or,
all.
hey,
Actually, the opposite. They said, you know, we didn't have the year. We know it. We're sort of, you know, for lack of a better word, we're sort of embarrassed by our lack of production and not being in the mix where we want to be. So we want to resolve that, and the only way to do that is, you know, let's get it done, and we want to be in. So I thought our effort, too bad you weren't here in the Colorado game. I thought our game against Colorado, a very good team, was a really good, solid effort. I didn't like our game as much with the Devils. It sort of unraveled, I think, on the second goal in the second period. But I thought that part of it, our commitment level was really good. I thought on Saturday night. Sunday, I thought when they started pulling away, we just didn't have enough pushback.
Predators general manager Barry Trotz is with us. When it comes to Andrew Burnett, I think he's a good coach because, again, he's won enough in the league for me to think he's a good coach. What happened last year makes me think he's a good coach. And yet at the same time, if you're going to run it back with Yossi and Forsberg and Saros and Stamkos and Marchessault and Shea, how do you do that with Andrew Burnett as the coach? Is there any way he can stay on as coach? Because I'm looking for kind of a big change that might kind of shift the equilibrium around here. And if you can't do it on a roster front, then wouldn't the next logical step be the coach?
That's, I think everybody looks at it that way. I look at it probably a little differently. The response that we get from now to the end of the year, and then obviously we're going to have meetings with the players. I'm going to have a really good feel with direction. I mean, I'm with you. I think Andrew's a hell of a good coach. But at the same time, there has to be the roster and the coach have to, you know, have that be in sync in all aspects. So I'm running this to the end. We'll assess and we'll make our decisions.
When it comes to everybody having a bad season, what do we chalk that up to? You know, Saros is not having a good enough season for what we're used to. Yossi's not having a good enough season for what we're used to. Forsberg's not having the season we're used to. The guys they brought in, I mean, Steven Stamkos is having the worst stretch of his career right now. Even the young guys, Evangelista, Tommy Novak, not having the years we expected. What do you chalk that up to?
Well, I wish I could give you a logical answer to that. There's so many things that you can assess. You know, I don't think anybody thought that we would, you know, if you look at the Yossis, the Saros, in terms of our goals against, the way we play and all that, especially goaltenders. The goaltenders are a product of the way you play. And so have we made it predictable enough for them to have success? The way we play, I think our mindset has changed a little bit. Obviously, we want to score more goals. We try to score more goals. And what happens sometimes, we expose our other end. So a little bit of mindset sometimes when, you know, I thought against Colorado, this is my coaching 101 is, you know, Colorado was regrouping. They have great speed. And, you know, our F1 was really tight to our F2 and 3 through the neutral zone when they had full possession. We had good gaps. There wasn't any room for them to really wind up. We were picking up, McKinnon early, taking away his options a lot better. And then in Jersey, we got spread out a little bit and there was more room. And therefore, we gave up a lot more. So, a little bit is systematic. A little bit of that is awareness with the guys on the ice, and attention to detail. So things like that you can correct. It can help you in terms of the goals against. And then on our back end, I mean, we had to chase games. When we chase games, we usually don't do well. When we are patient and maybe don't chase the game, maybe we can score first, we actually play a pretty solid game. And part of that is maybe we don't have enough up front or the patience to that. I know our back end right now without Lausanne and obviously they've moved Carrier. Those are, you know, two pretty good defensemen. And you're opening it up to, you know, Blankenberg was in Milwaukee this year and I think he's had a hell of a year. Barron, who is getting, he's under a look under fire. Like he's got, you see something there, but there's still lots of holes in his game. So we're trying to develop those type of guys, and the consistency level on the back end is not great right now.
Do you think when it comes to the coach that the system that Andrew Burnett, and I know that he's adjusted the system and that they've adjusted to the system, but do you think that maybe it was a mismatch between the skills of the players and what the system asks of them?
In some ways, maybe yes, and in some ways, no. Because you had success with it last year, and you brought pretty well the whole roster back, except for 2 or 3 guys.
Sure.
So it should apply, but it wasn't applying this year for whatever reason. I do know that teams become a lot more familiar with you second time around, and so you may have to adjust. And I think Andrew's done a good job of adjusting there. Those are things that you do. I mean, I played every system known to man, I think, in the game with some of our teams. And, I've been in this situation in the past where, like we play a sort of a 1-2-2. And, I got funky when we got, in this situation. I tried to look at our roster. Okay, let's try something for the last 10 games. Let's do some of those things. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it made it even worse. So, we're in a position where, I said to Andrew, if there's things that you want to find out, things that you want to try, do it. I give you full reign to do that. But at the same time, he wants to develop, put guys like Svechkov and the Evangelista and those guys into really good situations. At the same time, they've got to produce when they get in those situations as well. So, all that being said, it's a time to make sure that we're competing, make sure that we're staying detailed in what he's asking them to do. And, if you want to try something, you have the ability to do that.
Barry Trotz is our guest on the program. I saw the comments earlier today that you made about not wanting to tank, not wanting to lose games, not wanting to. But at the same time, how do you solve the center ice position if you don't end up with the second pick and don't take the kid out of BC and end up with the 13th pick in the draft or end up with the 9th pick in the draft or something like that? How do you fix the center ice position when clearly it feels like O'Reilly's up there in age, Stamkos is playing center right now, but is probably better suited on the wing, big picture? How do you long-term, I know you've got the Edstrom kid and Svechkov's done some nice, but how do you do that without the number 1, number 2 pick in the draft?
Well, I think you got to do it different ways. You've got to overpay. That's why we have a lot of draft capital. And you do it that way. You find a willing partner. Ideally, if we could ever get that big piece now and Ryan moves down, and when you get in a really good window and Ryan's Ryan gets all the tough matchups night in and night out defensively. If he moved down the lineup and was in a real good second or third hole, we'd be a better team overall, because Ryan's skill set, he'd be able to not necessarily have to take on every matchup every night. He might be able to, as I say, gang tackle between lines a little bit. We ask a lot of Ryan, and he's a tremendous player, as you know. And we're gonna get a lot of teams that are inquiring about him. But at the same time, center ice position, someone has to play against McKinnon every night.
Sure.
And can Steven do that? Can Svechkov do it? Can Novak do it? Probably not full time. So they may have to gang tackle. We got to find a partner. Center ice is probably the hardest to get. You're just going to have to overpay at some point through draft choices or prospects and get that guy, and finding a willing partner who's someone who has got deep in that position or soured on the guy.
So there's a lot of names, I think, that people assume when it comes to the deadline, whether it's Nyquist, which is probably the first name at the top, but you do have a bunch of guys with no movement clauses on the team. We're starting to see a little bit more in the league of teams going to guys with NMCs and saying, hey, would you accept again, I'm kind of thinking, like, how do you shake things up outside of firing the coach? How do you shake things up as far as the roster is concerned would you go to one of your guys if you felt like there was an opportunity and ask them to waive a no movement clause? How do you feel about that?
100%. 100%. I owe that to the team. I owe that to our staff. I owe it to the ownership, and I owe it to our fans. So if there is something, if someone that said, hey, you think about this, or if I propose something, if it made some sense, I would have no problem going to the player and say, listen, it's not working. Would you consider this? We sign those players, and all players have some protection. A lot of players, the better ones in this league, have some protection, either full or part of their contract protection, some sort. And there's nothing wrong with asking that. They can say no, and some players have done that. And some players that say, yeah, I think it'll work. So all that being said, if it comes up, I have no problem asking.
So you're the doctor in all of this, and we're, I guess, not the patient, but we're at least viewing it from the side. What does this team need for next year to not be this year? Like, what does this team, is it a certain player? Is it a young guy? Is it a coaching change? Is it what, in your opinion, as the doctor, Barry Trotz, does this hockey team need to get right?
Well, I can give you answers that I have right now, but I think to be, I'm not trying to avoid the question at all, but I think to give you a very accurate assessment of what I think we need, because that would have to be something that I have to do at the end of the season. I want to be quite honest with you, is that I could say I need this and this, and then something comes up in the next couple of days. We may not need that a week from now. Mm-hmm. Something, because that's the way this business works. There's going to be something in the next 6-7 days that I didn't see, didn't expect. Ryan McDonough showed up on the Preds doorstep in the spring. There's things like that happen. So, to be quite honest, I have to go to the end of the season. I've got my own thoughts right now. Obviously, center ice, we always talk about it, but our defense has to be fixed. We've got some holes. We miss Lazon, we miss Willsby, we miss a couple guys, but we need that, correct that part. The goaltending will get corrected when that part's corrected, and then obviously we need keep working on the center ice. We're doing that through the draft and anytime there's trade opportunities, and then we just need our young guys to step up too. I mean, we there's been a lot of talk about our older guys, and they haven't done it, and they're the guys that we rely on. But our young guys got to step up too. I mean, we talked about Evangelista hasn't had the year that he wanted. Sveshkov is doing what we probably expected at this point. LaRue was doing the things, and obviously he's hurt. So everybody's there, but the guys, Tommy Novak or Evangelista, the next group really left us in that middle grade that could have helped us because they don't get the hard matchups. They don't get they're not necessarily out against the difference makers all the time. So, last year, Tommy Novak, Evangelista, they were in that position. They performed and they got it done.
One thing that kind of bothers me a little bit is when I look at these prospect websites, that kind of rank them. You guys have a bunch of prospects and you've used a bunch of draft picks. You have a bunch of future draft picks. But when I look at kind of the top tier prospects, the guys that the gurus think, will be first pair defensemen, top line players, your guys aren't necessarily ranked there. And if they are, it's, David Edstrom, who hasn't played in North America, or it's, Igor Surin, who's like 17 years old.
Yeah.
Is there a worry that the reinforcements that could really be impact players for this team are not close to being on the Predators? Because that's when I look at one of those lists and I see, again, all these other teams with guys with prospects ranked ahead of the Predators guys. It worries me that, maybe we think that Andrew Gibson's a little bit better than he is, or that these guys are going to be third pair defensemen and third line guys. And I look at the Predators and I want first line guys and first pair guys.
Well, every draft, everybody wants those.
Sure.
They're hard to get. That's easy to get. This, hopefully it's easy. If you want that, then we have to stay where we are.
In all seriousness, I know you don't want to hear this. I want you to lose every game the rest of the way. And I want to draft the kid out of Boston College, and I want to stick him as the second line center next year behind O'Reilly. And I want to, Go with him.
Yeah, no, there's going to be some pain. Like we talked about it. I expected pain 2 years ago. We
Sure.
didn't have it. I expected pain last year. Didn't happen. Maybe it's time that we had the pain. Plain and simple. That's how you get those guys. You have to be a little bit rotten for a little bit, but we haven't been rotten for a long time. I mean, we haven't. We've been a team that's in that mushy middle, if you say.
But you don't want to embrace the rotten.
No, I'm saying I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it now. You know, we took our swing, okay, and we still need guys to be able to play against top players. We have some of those players. They're starting to age. Roman Yossi, Forsberg, you're getting older. All those guys are getting older. The next group needs some support. The next group is going to need those guys. If we finish where we are this year and we get a high pick, that young man is going to need some help. You do. And but I think we're going to be okay. We have a good culture. We don't believe in losing. So maybe it's just stay in the course. That's all.
Again, I am rooting for the losing. I hate saying it, but this is how this league. I mean, I watched the Four Nations. Every single guy on the ice was picked like number 3 overall.
Yeah. You're very accurate on that. The whole league, the top players, you go to every All-Star game, you go to the Four Nations. The guys that are move the needle are, top 5. And you're going to get a good player in the second round. You're going to get a good player. You're going to find. I mean, Patrick Hornquist had a great career. He was the last player picked.
Sure. I mean, Ekholm, Rena, those guys. I do wonder this, though, when it comes, last one for you, Barry Trott's with us, when it comes to the deadline, like I expect that there will be some guys moved out, whether it's Nyquist, McCarron, Sissons, whomever. You're going to get back, a 4th round pick here or a 5th round pick there or a 2nd round pick or something like that. Is the point, you've already got a lot of draft picks. Yeah. Is the point like, hey, screw it. Let's take 100 kids. And if we take 100 of them, and if 5 of them become superstars, great. And then we'll discard the other 95. Or is it, hey, let's load up on picks. So hopefully this time next year, if the team is good at the deadline, I can then turn around and take all these picks and say, okay, now I'll acquire this future UFA as a rental to come in here to play center for that kind of thing.
All of the above. The timing of it is, I can't answer to that. All of the above. Like if we can get a good player using picks, let's do it. If we, all those trade chips, those assets are something that you can use. You can draft. You can crop dust the whole draft and see what happens.
I don't think that's a bad idea, by the way. The Titans ended up with Derrick Henry by doing that one time.
Oh yeah. It's not a bad. I think Chicago one year they had just a boatload of picks. I think they took Kane and they took someone else, and then they had like 20 other picks, and they just sort of crop dusted the whole draft. Yeah, and then some guys stuck, and they turn it around pretty quick. So that's a good strategy if it's there. Another strategy you might get that deal. You say, you know what? If I give up 2 first rounders, I'm going to get this guy that I know will be a top line center. They're soured on them, whatever. Those opportunities all come up, but I just can't answer them right now. It gives me that flexibility. So if we can get a player and a pick, a lot of times I think in our situation, if at the trade deadline, just because we're a little bit lean on players, I may take a player back just to get us through the season. Also might help in sort of in terms of rather retention. You get a little higher pick if you take someone on because they can't make the money work. So you move up the ladder in terms of your leverage there. So all that will be in play, and we'll see where we are come the 8th of next month.
I said last one, but I lied. I have one more last one, which is for the fans that are just getting through the rest of the season, that like me had high expectations, have understood this season is what it is. What would your message to them be for the rest of the season and the optimism going into the deadline, which is essentially the beginning of the offseason?
Well, I think, understand that, there's going to be some pain, and part of that pain is on the bright side of that is you're going to get some good stuff out of anything worth doing, as they say, you have to go through some pain to do it, and we're going to have to go through some pain to get some of those guys. I'm not forcing it. I want our veteran guys and our team to lay it on the line every night. I know our roster is at this point is not as deep and is not as strong as it should be, but do not lie down on anything. I know that there's going to be some tough nights where they're going to come at us and we might not be able to match. There's a lot of different things, and just leave it on the line for the fans. I think that's one thing that I've always known about Nashville is, I had some teams that there wasn't a lot of skill and we didn't win a lot of games in the early years. But if we competed every night and we showed up, our fans recognize that. And we have great fans. I mean, we really do. And, we make sure this is still Smashville. Make sure we're a team that's not laying down. Make sure we're a team that is going to get up off the floor and get better, in the future here.
Barry Trotz, as always, it's good to see you. I mean, I guess, I would like it if the team was more fun last year, but still, it's good to see you as always. I normally say good luck because it's usually right before the game, but I'm sorry. I want to lose. So bad luck.
Yeah. Well, okay. I appreciate the confidence of bad luck. But at the same time, you know where I stand.
I do know where you stand. Always a coach, Barry Trotz, Stillman and Company. We continue 102.5 The Game. Stillman and Company, great stuff with Barry Trotz. As usual, we went a little long. One texter says, Joel says, I'll laugh if Saros gets hot the rest of the season, starts sealing games and wrecking the tank, but it probably won't happen. I am scared to death. Again, like I said, I want to lose every game the rest of the year, and it is in the best interest of the Predators. That's why. Not because I want anybody fired, but because I want the high pick. All right, Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025. Titans at the Combine. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 125 again.
what you want to do in the offseason is you want to maximize every resource you have to put together the best roster you can get. And the only way you can do that is by knowing each of the draft and unrestricted free agency forwards, backwards, upside down, because the decisions you make, just because you want a corner doesn't mean there's going to be a corner there in free agency or a corner there in the draft. Because you want another position doesn't mean they're going to be there. And you can't, I mean, you can, and people do, but you can't go out and waste a bunch of money on a corner that you're going to bring in that can't play. That's what kills you in the cap world.
There you go. That was the old man talking about, hey, before you get there, you got to know what's out there in free agency. And then you've got to decide what else is out there in the draft. You cannot just sit there and say, oh, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine, which is what this team has done the last couple of years. When they went into the draft last year without a right tackle and without a left tackle, you can't do that. When they went into the draft and they had not replaced Danico Autry, you can't do that. So Mike Borgonzi was at the combine today, and he was asked a question about free agency. Now, the Titans, because they spent a bunch of money in free agency last year, have kind of demonized it, saying, draft, develop, retain. And I even told somebody with the Titans about a month ago, I said, I hate this demonization of free agency that the Titans are doing right now. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, free agency is very beneficial when it's done correctly. But when you go trade third-round picks and sign L'Jarius Sneed a contract with bad knees, like, you're going to reap what you sow. And this was when asked about kind of, filling holes in free agency. Mike Borgonzi said something today that I very, very much loved hearing, and it was new to my ears. Here's what he said.
We're trying to fill, probably as many holes as we can before the draft, and you're trying to see. At this point, you have a free agency board, you have a draft board. You're trying to see the depth in free agency and the depth in the draft and where you might be able to acquire those players. But you certainly want to try to fill as many holes as you can in free agency. And, we have some work to do on the roster.
Okay. By my count, the Titans have a bunch of holes. And it's quarterback. I always leave quarterback out because it's like I almost forget that, the most obvious one. Quarterback, tackle, right guard, tight end, wide receiver, edge, inside backer, safety, kicker, long snapper. And then there's some depth things that they also, are missing as well. In a perfect world, and I think just based off the way he talked about it today, I think Mike Borgonzi might get this. A lot of you don't. In a perfect world, I think they can hit every need before the draft. And then what that means is when you get to draft day, or even before draft day, when somebody calls, and I think the Titans are trying to trade the first pick, and I think the Titans are going to be successful in trading the first pick, so they're going to move back to 3 or 6, or I don't think they're going to move further back than 6, but they're going to move back to 3 or whatever. When you're there, you can pick the best player. And then when you add a second rounder in this year's draft, at 35, you can pick the best player. And at 34, you can pick the best player. And you end up, even though you might have a guy ahead of them for 1 year, you'll end up in the long run with the better player. The Titans didn't need a safety when they drafted Kevin Byard. They didn't need a running back when they drafted Derrick Henry. They already had DeMarco Murray. But big picture, it was a good thing that they drafted Kevin Byard. It was a good thing that they drafted Derrick Henry. And many of you will think that you can't fill every need in free agency, and that's not true. Because what a lot of people will say is last year, Jared, we couldn't fill every hole in free agency. That's why we don't have a right tackle. And I'm like, so you couldn't have signed Jermaine Illuminor? You couldn't have traded for Morgan Moses? You couldn't have done those things, or you chose not to do those things. The difference is the guys that know, the Floyd Reeses of the world, what I think I'm getting subtle clues that Mike Borgonzi knows that he gets it. Those guys realize they're not just trying to get the best free agent at every position, but they're trying to get a capable free agent at every position. And I use the Commanders as an example. Do you know how many top of the market free agents the Washington Commanders signed last year? Do you know how many contracts they gave? North of $50 million. You know what? Let's be fair, Ian, because I think the Lloyd Cushenberry deal was $50 million, and I think that the guarantees on Ridley and Snead were $50 million. Let's say $30 million. Do you know how many contracts north of $30 million the Washington Commanders gave out last year?
30 million total?
Yep.
Not per season?
Nope.
30 million total. One?
Two. Do you know how many free agents they signed?
Maybe like 8?
23. So they gave Dorrance Armstrong a $33 million contract. They gave Frankie Louvu a $31 million contract. And if you want to count Tyler Biadasz, their center, at $29.25 million, again, roughly half of what you gave Cushenberry, and I think Biadasz is the better player, but they gave Tyler Biadasz a $29.25 million contract. Other than that, everybody else, affordable deals. Their starting right guard, Nick Allegretti, $16 million. Austin Eckler, $8.3 million. And again, this is the total deal. And you guys know how this works. You know, if a guy sucks after 1 year in the NFL, you get rid of him. Bobby Wagner, $6.5 million. Jeremy Reeves, $6 million. Mariota, $6 million. Jeremy Chin, starting safety, $4.1 million. Cleveland Ferrell, $3.75 million. Brandon McManus, $3.6. Dante Fowler Jr., $3.25. Dante Fowler had like 10 sacks this year for them. Michael Davis, a corner, $3.2. Again, it was a bunch of small deals, but these guys actually played for him. Noah Igubenagany was a former first-round pick. Again, they didn't sign him saying, oh, he's going to be a star because he was a former. No, but hey, he can get out on the field. And they signed him for $1.2 million. Olamide Zacchaeus played a big role for them this year. $1.2 million. Noah Brown, again, 1 year deal. And I think that Mike Borgonzi gets that. And I think before, for whatever reason, I understand why fans don't get it. They have real jobs during the day that they work. So they just go on their phone and Google free agents and see T. Higgins and say, T. Higgins, that's who we need. I'm not talking about T. Higgins, although T. Higgins would be nice. I'm not talking about T. Higgins. I'm talking about Olamide Zacchaeus. I'm talking about Nick Westbrook-Akine as a guy that, like, hey, $6 million a year for NWI, put him in there, and now hopefully you'll draft a receiver. But if you don't draft a receiver, then at least I know you can play with him as starting at receiver. Those are the free agents I'm talking about. And that's why I've yet to do, and this is where the hard part comes in, because, you know, Borgonzi was talking about that free agent board, and I do value the free agent board significantly because I think there's a lot of value in that and knowing what's out in free agency instead of, again, doing what the Titans have done, which is getting out into free agency and just saying, oh, let's just sign Chidobe Awuzie for a bunch of money. But at the same time, I do think that it's hard to know exactly what's going to be out there in unrestricted free agency because we don't know who's going to re-sign their own guys and we don't know who's going to cut guys. And so it's harder before the cuts start to roll in, and they'll start to roll in this week, next week, but it's harder when you don't know who the cuts are to say, okay, you know, this would be a guy that would be a good tackle to come in here. And then if you draft over him, you draft over him. You draft under him, you draft under him. Who cares? But before, I'm not sure that Mike Borgonzi, before I wasn't sure that the Titans knew that. And now after listening to Borgonzi speak, I think there's something to that. One texter says, Jared, our phone lines, by the way, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Jared, your interview with Barry Trotz was just as soft as I expected. Ian, did you think that was a soft interview with Barry Trotz?
I think he's just good at talking around some of the answers.
Again, I asked him about how does the coach keep his job. I asked him why everyone's having a bad season. I asked him twice what hope the fans should have. I told him that I wanted him to lose every game the rest of the year. I mean, what? I asked him, he said that he sat down with the players, you know, the veteran players, and told them, hey, here's my plan. And if you're not into it, let me know. And not only did I ask him what the plan was for those veteran players, but I asked if any of the veteran players went up to him and said, yeah, I'm not interested in this. Go ahead and trade me. What was I supposed to ask? Was I supposed to ask why they were having a good season? Sometimes people, I don't get it. During the year, it's like this Borgonzi stuff today. We're talking about Rand Carthon. During the year, I'd talk about Rand Carthon, and everybody would tell me that I was racist. And now I talk about Rand Carthon, and now you say, oh, Rand lives rent-free in your head. No, I'm comparing it to what they had, and the hope is that what they have now is better. Unbelievable. One texter says, what is the day we'll start hearing about signings being reported? Is it after the negotiations? Is it March 10th? I can never remember. I don't know. It's like the league year starts on like March 13th, and then there's 2 days of tampering. And then as soon as the tampering window opens, they start coming out. So whatever the first day of the league year is, it's usually then. Now, if a guy gets cut, a cap casualty. If a guy gets cut, then he can sign tomorrow. Like Daniel Jones got signed to the active roster for the Vikings during the playoff game, and that hurts Daniel Jones because if Daniel Jones is staying in their practice squad, Daniel Jones can sign a contract right now. But again, the signings will start the first day of the league year, and I expect the Titans to be active, but very patient. Predators Game Day, Stillman and Company, 105 again. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. They take great care of my home. And when you come to the game tonight, you can see that logo right there on the ice. Hiller has been in business since 1990, and they are family-owned and operated. My guy, Jimmy Hiller, and that's a good man right there. Jimmy Hiller was recently named amongst the most admired CEOs because of the way he truly cares for his team and his clients. And again, I know that because I use Hiller at my home. Hiller takes care of the customer on every job, and they stand behind their work with 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be or the service is free. If you're not pleased with the work performed, they'll make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds of Falls and Beatty. Hiller, call the Hatfish Truck today.
It's hockey night in Smashville.
Walk over to Yossi.
His one-timer is scored! Bringing you the keys to victory and the latest storylines surrounding the Nashville Predators. This is Predators Game Day, now on Stillman and Company.
Predators Game Day is presented by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ Anderson. Tonight, the Predators host the defending Cup champion Florida Panthers. The Panthers are 34-21-3, good for 71 points. The Predators are 20-29-7, bad for 47 points. And the one thing I will say about the rest of the season is we want the Predators to lose. And I know you're going to say, no, don't say that. We don't want to lose. We don't. Barry Trotz was sitting over there saying, I'm never going to say that. I'm not. The only way you get the good players is to draft them. And they got to lose. So go Panthers. Tonight, the rest of the season. Max has the pregame next. Puck drop 7 o'clock. Stillman and Company. By the way, 9.3% chance of the first overall pick in the draft. We'll see you tomorrow at 2.